Chapter 84. Where do you think you're going? The female assassin's heart turned cold. Her target this time was Wang Chong. Regardless of whether it was to kill him or to have him forge a sword for her, she couldn't allow him to escape. Pung! Enduring the pain in her body, the female assassin hurriedly chased after Wang Chong. Outside the window, the moonlight shone brightly. She could see a figure as agile as a serpent dashing toward the Wang family residence's warehouse. The female assassin's face turned cold. Without any hesitation, she immediately chased after Wang Chong. But just as she was several zhang away from the female assassin, a black gleam flashed, and a massive steel arrow carrying a powerful might flew toward the female assassin's face at the speed of lightning. Boom! In an instant, the female assassin was only able to raise her broken sword before her body to block the attack. Then she was struck by the thick metal arrow and was sent flying. Tuobagon masters, hurry up and stop her. Don't let her escape. As Wang Chong dashed along the grass, he bellowed loudly. The first half of his sentence was in Mandarin, but the second half was in Sanskrit. Roar! Female benefactor, stay behind. Arloja and Ablonidin roared furiously. Black smoke billowed from their bodies, and as though two arrows leaving the bow, they charged forward. Pung pung! In a short period of time, the three powerful shockwaves collided with one another. The shockwaves from the explosion even affected Wang Chong, who was a dozen zhang away. When Wang Chong turned around, he saw Arloja and Ablonidin's robes puffing up. Their bodies wavered, and they retreated several steps. On the other hand, the female assassin also made use of this opportunity to charge out. In midair, she deflected Bagon's thick metal arrow with an arrow before her figure blurred. Executing the specter steps once more, her figure morphed into a blurry shadow and darted into the shadows at the corner of the wall. Lad, this matter isn't over yet. That hateful voice sounded from the darkness, and it sounded as though her teeth were about to shatter. In the blink of an eye, the Eastern Island's female assassin disappeared from sight. That fellow's strength is incredible. Upon seeing this sight, Wang Chong was astonished. He had witnessed Arloja and Ablonidin's strength before. For this female assassin to be able to fight against the two of them at the same time, her strength was truly astonishing. Young master, who is this woman? She's so strong, even two of my arrows couldn't hurt her. Tuobaguan rushed over with an arrow on his back. The most basic requirement for an archer was to have a keen eye, and Tuobaguan was an expert in this field. However, after the other party executed the specter steps, Tuobaguan was unable to identify her. Is it that merchant from the western regions, Mosade? This guy is so cunning. Other than those masked men in black, he actually arranged for another group of assassins. Shun Hai and Meng Long also rushed over from the back with their swords in their hands. It's not Mosade. Wang Chong shook his head. Oh! The group of people immediately looked over in surprise. This person is a Japanese assassin. No matter how strong Mosade is, it's impossible for him to hire a Japanese assassin to deal with me. And she doesn't recognize the Wuxia steel sword in my hand. Wang Chong said as he lifted the Wuxia steel sword in his hand to take a look. There were simply too many flaws on the Japanese female assassin. Initially, Wang Chong thought that she was hired by Mosade. However, what Mosade wanted was his Wuxia steel sword, and this person wanted his life. If it weren't for the fact that she happened to discover the 7-foot-long, slender, and thick-backed sword on the table, and the fact that the Japanese were especially proficient in swordsmanship, she would have killed him long ago. Then who sent her? Shun Hai and Meng Long frowned. Wang Chong shook his head silently. Even though he didn't know who sent the assassin, the only one who would be able to send such an assassin recently was either Su Bai or Yao Feng. Su Bai had already been locked up in the Court of Judicial Review, and no matter how capable he was, it was impossible for him to hire a female assassin. Then what was left was, at this point, a dark shadow flashed across Wang Chong's forehead. Let's talk about this matter in the future. Reinforce our defenses for the next few days. That person might come again. Shun Hai, Ming Long, and Tuobaguan nodded their heads in fear. If not for Wang Chong's wits and having Tuobaguan and the two Cindy monks deliver the weapons to Shun Hai and Meng Long, no one would have known that Wang Chong was in danger. That female assassin probably wouldn't have known that there wasn't a weapon rack in the corner of the Wang clan's warehouse. It was because Shun Hai and Meng Long heard this, as well as the fact that Wang Chong had been in his room the entire time, not opening the door, that they realized that something was amiss. Thus, they gathered Tuobogan Ablonadin and Arloja to rush over. "Master, I'll be troubling you for the next 2 days." Wang Chong turned around and spoke to the 2 Sindhi monks in Sanskrit. "Don't worry, Gongzi. We'll stay close to you for the next few days to ensure your safety." Recalling the previous situation, the 2 of them felt a lingering fear. The current Wang Chong was of utmost importance to them. No matter what, they couldn't allow anything to happen to him. After receiving the assurance of the 2 Sindhi monks, Wang Chong heaved a sigh of relief. With Ablonadin, Arloja, and Tuoboguyon around, he didn't have to worry about the female assassin for the time being. "Perhaps it's about time for me to get some help." A glint flashed across Wang Chong's eyes and a thought flashed across his mind. This incident also served as a reminder to Wang Chong. Time and space had changed, and so had his identity and strength. If it was in the past, as the Grand Marshal of the Central Plains, Wang Chong wouldn't have paid any heed to such an assassin. However, everything was different now. Wang Chong had to remind himself repeatedly that he was no longer the Grand Marshal of the Central Plains. He was just a mere scion of an Origin Energy Tier 5 clan. Before he succeeded in cultivating those cultivation techniques, he wouldn't be able to execute a single one of them. Ablonadin, Arloja, and the others couldn't possibly guard him all the time, and Tuobokyon couldn't possibly stay by his side. Under the circumstances where he wasn't strong enough, in order to prevent such a thing from happening again, Wang Chong had to find some formidable bodyguards and subordinates to protect him. Even though this wasn't an easy task, Wang Chong was still able to find a few of them. "There's no need to rush this matter. I'll think about it after grandfather's birthday," Wang Chong thought. Grandfather's birthday was just a few days away. With Ablonadin and Arloja around, it shouldn't be a problem for him to endure for a few days. Furthermore, if that female assassin still remembered what he told her about the Spectre Steps, she probably wouldn't have the time to harass him for the time being. "Masters, I'll have to trouble you to stay beside me for the next few days." Wang Chong turned to look at Shenhai and Menglong. "Also, Shenhai and Menglong, call little sister over tomorrow." He also told his cousin to get a few experts from his uncle to come over and guard his mother's residence. "I'm afraid that there might be others who would lay their hands on mother. Also, inform the Imperial Army to increase the patrols in the vicinity." Right, it would be best to inform uncle and have him deal with this matter personally. It didn't matter how many guards there were. It was safest for the Imperial Army to patrol the area frequently. The Imperial Army of the Royal Court was filled with experts of true martial realm and above. With these people patrolling the area frequently, even the female assassin would have to consider whether it was worth it to do so. "Yes, I'll get it done now," Shenhai and Menglong replied before leaving. After making all these arrangements, Wang Chong heaved a sigh of relief. After making all these arrangements, the Wang clan was truly impregnable. At the very least, he wouldn't have to worry about an attack of this level in the future. After making arrangements for Ablonadin and Arloja's residence, Wang Chong headed back to his own residence. The Wang clan finally quietened down after a huge commotion in the middle of the night. Pung! Wang Chong pushed open the door, and just as he stepped over the threshold, the world suddenly shook. An intense bout of dizziness struck his head. Before Wang Chong could react, he felt the world around him changing. In an instant, it felt as though countless things were pressing down on him. That kind of heavy pressure was almost suffocating. Warning! Warning! The first world constraint has arrived. Before Wang Chong could even react, the world before him had already begun to churn. An endless torrent of energy surged toward him with the might of a thunderbolt. In the midst of this torrent of energy, Wang Chong seemed as insignificant as an ant. Pung! Wang Chong's right knee caved in, and he fell to the ground. At the same time, Wang Chong could vaguely hear a rumbling in his body. A bizarre but resilient energy burst forth from his body, forming a faint yellow barrier that shielded Wang Chong's body. Boom! The surging torrent of energy surged past Wang Chong's body like a tidal wave. The faint yellow barrier around Wang Chong's body shattered with a pop, taking away all of Wang Chong's stamina. Who? Wang Chong's face was pale, and he sat on the ground. His entire body was drenched in sweat. Gongzi, what's wrong? A Sanskrit voice came from next door. It was Ablonidin. I'm fine. Wang Chong replied weakly. Everything before him returned to normal. The heavy pressure and the feeling of the world crashing down on him only lasted for an instant before disappearing. The room was dark and silent. The world's shackles had passed. Masters, did you two see anything just now? Or did you discover anything? Wang Chong panted for breath and said after a moment of silence. No, I only heard that you fell. It was Ablonidin's voice, and there was a hint of doubt in his voice. For some reason, Wang Chong's voice had become exceptionally weak. However, recalling how Wang Chong had just survived the assault of a female assassin, he felt relieved and didn't think too much about it. Oblivious to Ablonidin and Arloja, in the other room, Wang Chong was taken aback upon hearing their reply. All of a sudden, he seemed to have come to a realization. So, I'm the only one who could see such a huge commotion? Wang Chong fell into deep thought. Regardless of whether it was the powerful torrent of energy or the faint yellow barrier around him, other than him, Ablonidin, Arloja, and the others were unaware of such a huge commotion. Wang Chong suddenly realized that the power of the world was directed at him. The world constraint had already surpassed the capabilities of an ordinary cultivator. Even Ablonidin and Arloja weren't able to sense it. Chapter 85. This was the first time Wang Chong had experienced the world binding force, or rather the repulsive force. It felt as though he was not tolerated by the entire world. In front of that majestic power, Wang Chong could deeply feel how insignificant he was, and his heart palpitated. In reality, it was not just him. Wang Chong believed that any warrior would be as insignificant as an ant in front of this torrent of heaven and earth. On the collapsed bed, Wang Chong sat on the ground, panting heavily, sweat pouring down his forehead like rain. So this is the price of reincarnating to become the enemy of the entire world. If not for the Stone of Destiny, I would have been crushed into powder long ago. Wang Chong closed his eyes, thinking silently, and a bitter smile appeared on his face. At this moment, Wang Chong suddenly understood what kind of predicament reincarnating would face in this universe. Right now, the Stone of Destiny was his only hope. The torrent of heaven and earth was endless, as though a flood was crashing down on him. However, the faint light emitted by the Stone of Destiny was like a shelter in the midst of a storm, helping him escape this crisis. The 20 Destiny energy should have been used up by now. This is only the first wave. This thought flashed through Wang Chong's mind, and the next moment, Wang Chong saw the Stone of Destiny in his mind. Warning: Destiny energy remaining 5 points. Duration of the next world binding force 3 months. Destiny energy required 30 points. Looking at this string of information, Wang Chong laughed bitterly in his heart. It was exactly as he had expected. However, the next time, the amount of destiny energy required to resist the world binding force was not 25 points but 30 points. After sitting on the ground for a while, as his stamina recovered, a strange feeling slowly spread throughout his body. A power that he had never felt before was suddenly released from his hair follicles, skin, and muscles all over his body. Wang Chong felt that while his stamina was recovering, his strength was also increasing. Not only that, this energy seemed to have a very strong penetrative ability. It began to penetrate through his skin and muscles, seeping into his bones and marrow, and began to automatically strengthen Wang Chong's bones, meridians, and even muscles. This is... Wang Chong's heart skipped a beat as he suddenly came to a realization. Wasn't this what the Stone of Fate had mentioned before? Every time he resisted the world restriction, his body would be strengthened? Thinking of this, Wang Chong was overjoyed. He jumped up from the ground and quickly executed the astral steps, practicing the heavy punch method. Bang bang bang. Strong winds blew in all directions in the room, and waves of air burst out like a tidal wave. As expected. When Wang Chong practiced the heavy punch, the speed at which the dissipating energy permeated his body increased tremendously. Under the transformation of this energy, Wang Chong could feel the bones in his body absorbing nutrients from his blood, rapidly becoming denser. As expected, could this energy be the dissipating energy of the world? Wang Chong was delighted. Recalling the surging energy of the world, could it be that when the faint yellow barrier formed by the energy of destiny broke apart, it captured some of the dissipating energy of the world and sent it back to him? Now that I think about it, the world restriction isn't that bad after all. Wang Chong chuckled. Becoming one with his mind, he hastened the cultivation of the heavy punch. Time slowly passed, and it was hard to tell how many days had passed. Gotcha! Wang Chong suddenly heard the crisp sound of his bones exploding. Somehow he seemed to have broken through a bottleneck, and Wang Chong felt his strength rising by a large margin in an instant. Panther bone 2 Dan. Wang Chong was overjoyed. He felt refreshed. Not only had he recovered to his peak, he had also recovered from the internal injuries he suffered from the Eastern Islands' female assassin's attack. Furthermore, his strength had also risen by a notch. With the success of Panther Bone 2 Dan, it was only a matter of time before he reached Origin Energy Tier 6. Wang Chong was overjoyed, and he only fell into a deep sleep when it was nearing dawn. Mother, I'm back. The next day, just as he was having his meal, the sound of bouncing could be heard. Pung! The door was pushed open, and his little sister barged in. Her hair was tied into a ponytail, and she was munching on a fragrant chicken drumstick. It was hard to tell if she had brought it from her cousin's place. Brother, I heard that some baddies came to our house last night. Where are they? Where are they? Let me give them a good beating. As the Wang family's little sister spoke, she looked around furiously. Then she raised her fair and tender fists, as though flaunting her prowess. You spend all day at cousin's place and you still have the time to come back? By the time you return, they would have already left. Wang Chong glanced at his little sister and said impatiently. After not seeing her for a few days, his little sister seemed to have changed completely. She had a rattledrum by her waist, a pair of embroidered shoes with silver bells on them, and a kite on her back. It seemed like his little sister hadn't been slacking off when he gave her the 100 gold taels. She had taken the money and spent it freely for a period of time. Hearing Wang Chong's words, Wang Xiaoyao stuck out her tongue and hurriedly ran to her mother's side. Her eyes darted around the room and soon she picked up a pair of chopsticks, stabbed a roasted goose on the table, and began munching on it. Gluttonous and playful. You haven't changed at all. Wang Chong shook his head. Looking at his little sister, he felt helpless. Given his little sister's talent, if she had spent some time on cultivation, how could she have reached such a low cultivation realm? There probably wouldn't be many people in the capital who could match her. However, his little sister was only 10 years old, and she was a gluttonous and playful person. Wang Chong couldn't change that. His little sister didn't return alone. Together with her were a few experts sent over by cousin Wang Zhuyan. They were the true experts of his big uncle's residence. Wang Chong arranged for them to stay near his mother's residence and guarded her day and night. Right, little brother? After the meal, his little sister suddenly beamed with joy. Tilting her head, she fawned, I heard from Shun Hai and Meng Long that you earned 600,000 gold taels. Let me take a look, let me take a look. As she spoke, she shook Wang Chong's arm with a pleading look on her face. I knew that you would do this. Wang Chong chuckled, but he didn't reject her. Instead, a doting look appeared on his face. Let's go, I'll bring you to take a look. In the Wang family's storehouse, Wang Xiaoyao's eyes were filled with stars upon seeing the mountain of gold. Wow, little brother, we're rich. The Wang family's little sister pounced over excitedly and started rolling on the pile of gold. As she rolled, she exclaimed excitedly, so much gold, so much gold. How much delicious food can we buy with this? Everything was fine at the start, but at the end it was all about food. Just as the matter of the Wang clan being assaulted was causing a huge commotion, a shocking matter occurred in the royal court, the consort Taizhen incident. The Son of Heaven, the Holy Emperor, was determined to bring consort Taizhen into the royal palace. In the royal court, the King of Song, King Qi, the Yao clan, the Wang clan, the Duke of Su, the Duke of Wei, the Duke of Zhao. All of the civil and military officials were embroiled in the matter. This included Wang Chong's big uncle, Wang General. The entire royal court was torn into two. Half supported the matter while the other half opposed it. This became the most sensational matter in the past few decades of the Tang dynasty. Regardless of whether they supported the matter or opposed it, their emotions were extremely intense. As a result, the atmosphere in the royal court became extremely tense. In fact, there were even 2 physicians who fought in the royal court, resulting in them bleeding profusely. In the end, both of them were imprisoned in the imperial prison of the Court of Judicial Review. At the same time, the entire Central Plains was in a state of turmoil. Everyone's gaze was drawn to the royal court. Wang Chong received the news while he was cultivating at home. Upon hearing the news from the royal court, Wang Chong fell silent for a very long time. To think that such a matter would still happen. Wang Chong raised his head. The sky was overcast, and there was an indescribable pressure in it. Looking at the gloomy sky, a hint of worry flashed across Wang Chong's eyes. There were many things in this world that were different from what he remembered. But regardless of which time-space continuum he was in, the death of Consort Wu in 740, and the wise and formidable holy emperor in the history of the Tang dynasty ordered Consort Shou to become a nun, as well as the Consort Taijin incident that brought her into the royal palace, all of this had a significant impact on the world. No one could understand why the wise and valiant sage emperor, who had spent the first half of his life forging ahead, the greatest person in Great Tang, even the Central Plains, would have such a drastic change in his personality, going against the principles of morality and bringing Consort Taijin into the palace. Thinking about it carefully, even now Wang Chong still couldn't understand why. This was definitely not the actions of a holy emperor, but the impact and consequences of this incident were extremely far-reaching. The Wang clan's backer, His Highness the King of Song, who wielded immense authority and influence in the royal court, had displeased the holy emperor due to his vehement opposition to this matter. As a result, he fell out of favor and was expelled from the royal court. Losing the backing of the King of Song was a heavy blow to the Wang clan. What was even worse was that the Wang clan had also chosen the wrong side in this political storm. Everyone had underestimated the holy emperor's determination in this matter. And the price of the Wang clan's underestimation was that they had suffered a huge blow in this matter. Since then they had never recovered. Be it in terms of power, status, or influence, they had all been greatly weakened, and they had been completely eliminated from the first echelon of the Tang dynasty. In a political battle, one wrong step and one wrong side would have such a cruel price to pay. For the Wang clan, this was a huge crisis. However, in the entire Wang clan, apart from Wang Chong, no one knew the future direction of the Wang clan. Although he understood, Wang Chong knew that there was nothing he could do now. The impact of this storm in the royal court was unprecedented, and it was not something that a 15-year-old child like him could decide. I can only wait until Grandpa's birthday. At that time, the King of Song will definitely go to Grandpa and ask for his support. In the royal court of the Tang dynasty, Old Master Yao of the Yao clan and his own grandfather were two obstacles that could not be avoided. In any major event in the royal court, their opinions had a decisive effect. Wang Chong knew that the King of Song would definitely ask for his grandfather's opinion during the birthday celebration. Suppressing his thoughts, Wang Chong continued to practice. Chapter 86. Days passed one after another, and in the Wang family residence, a figure danced around swiftly. Dragon ascending the clouds. Dragon submerging the waves. Dragon swallowing the water. Dragon exhaling the waves. Wang Chong's figure was agile and lively. He executed a simple dragon bone art fist art, and as though a serpentine dragon, he darted through the fake mountains and forests. This had already surpassed the limits of an ordinary fist art. Instead, it had reached the level of being able to utilize one's own will. Even the guards of the Wang family couldn't help but stare at Wang Chong. No one knew where the third young master learned this fist art from, and no one cared about it either. To the Wang family, after witnessing the third young master's ability to amass more than 600,000 gold taels in such a short period of time, this was nothing at all. By now no one was surprised by it. In the courtyard, Wang Chong's movement technique grew faster and faster. The air around him surged as though a tidal wave, and fallen leaves were swept up by Wang Chong. However, they didn't fall to the ground. Instead, as though small boats in the sea, they flowed along the air currents around Wang Chong. This was the sign of mastering the Herculean fist art. It's about time. A thought flashed across Wang Chong's mind, and the blood in his body flowed faster and faster. He had a feeling that he would be able to reach Origin Energy Tier 6 today. Pung pung pung. Surges of air currents exploded around Wang Chong. After an unknown period of time, boom! Wang Chong's body jolted, and a surge of origin energy burst forth from his body. As though a bottleneck had been broken, Endless origin energy gushed in from the surroundings and gushed into Wang Chong's body. Kacha. The crisp sound of his joints echoed throughout his body. Under the boost of the origin energy from the surroundings, Wang Chong's strength burst forth, and in the blink of an eye, he broke through from origin energy tier 5 to origin energy tier 6. Ha, the heaven's gate is open. I finally reached origin energy tier 6. Wang Chong was overjoyed. It was rare for Wang Chong to be so excited, but it was different this time. In martial arts there was a saying called, heavenly gate. This heavenly gate was not the 100 acupuncture points on the top of the head, but the bottleneck between the human body and the outside world. Upon reaching origin energy tier 6, one would be able to break through this bottleneck and absorb origin energy from the outside world. This was the greatest difference between origin energy tier 5 and origin energy tier 6. For example, the first 5 tiers of origin energy tier 9 were all for the purpose of opening the heaven's gate. Once a martial artist reached origin energy tier 6, they would be able to cultivate secret arts that could greatly enhance their strength, agility, and speed. For example, the Spectre Steps of the Eastern Islands female assassin was a speed-type secret art after reaching origin energy tier 6. It was impossible for one to learn such a powerful secret art before reaching origin energy tier 5. To Wang Chong that wasn't all. Once he reached origin energy tier 6, Wang Chong would be able to maneuver around even more freely. Even though he was the Grand Marshal of the Central Plains in his previous life, he had lost all of his cultivation. Thus Wang Chong could only start over from scratch. The origin gate is open was a good start for Wang Chong. If Wang Chong's limbs were bound in the past, Wang Chong now had a free hand. Boom! With a thought, Wang Chong punched out with his right fist, and in that instant, something inconceivable happened. Kacha, the bones in Wang Chong's body creaked, and his right arm suddenly grew to twice its original length. He reached his hand into the crevice of a fake mountain, and pong, the rock weighing more than 100 jin was lifted up. In Wang Chong's hand, a rock weighing more than 100 jin was as light as a feather. This was the ability of origin energy tier 6. Upon reaching this level, a martial artist's fighting prowess would be greatly enhanced. For a rock weighing more than 100 jin to be as light as a feather, this was something that ordinary people couldn't compare to. This is what they say. Gongzi's intelligence is truly incredible. We have only exchanged a few blows, but Gongzi is already able to grasp the arm-length fist in one fell swoop. In the corridor by the side, Arloja and Ablonidin walked down the stairs with their sleeves fluttering in the wind. The two of them nodded their heads in delight. Arm-length fist was a secret art of Sindhu. Different from the martial arts of the Central Plains, Sindhu was known for its bizarre nature. Upon mastering this arm-length fist, one's arm would be able to move from one side to the other, allowing one to catch one's opponent off guard. This was also a Sindhu martial art that the two of them had imparted to Wang Chong according to Wang Chong's current cultivation realm. They thought that it would take a long time, but to think that Wang Chong's improvement would be faster than they had expected. I have to thank the two masters for your guidance. Wang Chong smiled and walked over. In another world, there was a saying that Bodhidharma traveled east to impart martial arts. As such, Wang Chong had always been curious about the Sindhu martial arts of this world. Due to the famine and poverty in Sindhu, the overall standard of martial arts couldn't compare to that of the Central Plains. However, that didn't mean that it didn't have its strengths. Of all the martial arts in Sindhu, the one that Wang Chong was most curious about was the tortoise-breathing art. It was said that this was the secret art of the Sindhu monks. After mastering this secret art, one could bury themselves deep in the ground for 10 days and 10 nights without eating, drinking, or breathing, and nothing would happen to them. Some of the more formidable Sindhi sadhus could even remain motionless underground for 3 months or even several years, as if they were dead. In his previous life, this was the Sindhu martial art that Wang Chong wanted to learn the most, but he didn't have the chance to do so. Now that he had met Arloja and Ablonidin, how could Wang Chong let go of this opportunity? Arloja and Ablonidin spoke of everything they knew. The only problem was that Wang Chong wasn't able to learn it with his current cultivation. Hong long long. Just as they were speaking, the rumbling of a carriage sounded from the front door. From the carriage, his little sister's excited voice could be heard clearly. "Brother, it's time to set off. It's grandfather's birthday. Mother wants us to go to the Four Quarters Embassy right now. I got it. I'm coming. Hearing his little sister's loud voice reverberating through the entire Wang family residence, Wang Chong chuckled. A look of anticipation flashed in his eyes. Regardless of the storm outside, the entire Wang family residence was in a joyous mood today. Bright red lanterns were hung on the eaves of all of the houses. Many places were even painted with redwood paint, creating a festive atmosphere. Grandfather's 70th birthday was a huge occasion for the entire Wang clan. Other than Wang Chong's father, who was stationed by the borders, everyone else, including Big Uncle, Big Aunt, and Little Uncle, would be attending grandfather's birthday. Naturally, Wang Chong was the same as well. There were 365 days in a year, and this was the only day that Wang Chong could enter the Four Quarters Embassy to visit his grandfather. Even though he felt helpless, the Wang clan wasn't unique to a clan of generals and ministers. Where there was gain, there was bound to be loss. Masters, I'll be leaving first, Wang Chong said in Sanskrit. Ungongzi, we won't be accompanying you. Arloja and Ablonadin replied respectfully. The Four Quarters Embassy was a forbidden ground of the Tang dynasty, and it was heavily guarded by the experts of the imperial army. Even descendants of the Wang clan like Wang Chong weren't allowed to enter easily. Needless to say, Sindhi Buddhist monks like Arloja and Ablonadin. Wang Chong nodded. With his little sister around, the Wang clan's guards, and even the experts of the imperial army, he didn't have to worry about any accidents happening in broad daylight. Wang Chong began walking out. Outside the gates of the Wang family residence, a bright red carriage stopped. His mother and little sister were on it. Wang Chong dived into the carriage, and it slowly drove off. You two siblings, listen up. Chonger, you have to listen up as well. Today is grandfather's birthday, and other than us, many of your grandfather's old subordinates are coming over. When we reach there, speak less, eat more, and observe more. Don't cause any trouble for me. Whenever it was her father-in-law's birthday, Zhao Shuhua would be extremely nervous. In the family, even though she had the final say. But everyone knew that the backbone of the Wang clan, the true person at the helm, was actually Eunuch Wang. Her father-in-law had led a glorious life, and he was doted on by the Holy Emperor. The reason why the Wang clan was able to become a clan of generals and ministers was due to her father-in-law's contributions. In the Wang clan, her father-in-law wielded unparalleled authority. Zhao Shuhua had always been respectful and fearful of Gongzi. In truth, she wasn't the only one. The other sisters-in-law were the same as well. Mother, don't worry. I know what to do. Wang Chong patted his mother's back and consoled her. That's right, what is there for grandfather to be afraid of? I'm not afraid at all. Wang family's little Yao pouted. Hearing his little sister's words, Wang Chong and his mother smiled bitterly. In the Wang clan, grandfather had always been extremely strict. Regardless of whether it was his big brother, second brother, or cousin, they had all been reprimanded by grandfather. Even Wang Chong himself was the same in his previous life. The only exception was probably his little sister. For some reason, regardless of whether it was grandfather or grandmother, they were extremely fond of this little sister of theirs. At this age, grandfather had never scolded her before. Every time they saw his little sister, the two elders would chuckle happily. This made Wang Chong, his big brothers, and cousin incomparably jealous. But there was nothing they could do. His little sister was a magnet for affection. Furthermore, other than gluttony, girls were playful. They wouldn't cause any trouble. The carriage passed through the streets and alleys, heading toward the east. Several hours later, seated in the carriage, Wang Chong suddenly felt a majestic aura crushing down on him, as though a tidal wave. In that instant, Wang Chong felt as though he was facing a torrent of the world. We've arrived at the Four Quarters Embassy. Wang Chong immediately realized what was going on. He had been to the Four Quarters Embassy before, so this aura was extremely familiar to Wang Chong. Shua. Parting the curtains, Wang Chong gazed into the distance. Not too far away, a massive residence stood before him. The residence was square-shaped, and it was 7 to 8 times the size of an ordinary general or minister clan. It looked extremely simple, but it exuded an incomparably solemn and dignified aura. Anyone who walked by this place couldn't help but feel a sense of respect and reverence. They would lower their voices and slow their footsteps, as though fearing that they would alarm the person within. There wasn't a single person in the vicinity of the residence, not even a single house. Above the main gate of the residence, Wang Chong saw a simple signboard. On the signboard were 3 large words painted in black on a white background. The words were bold and forceful, as if they were bursting out of the paper, like a true dragon soaring into the sky, affecting the world. This was the Four Quarters Embassy. Chapter 87. The Four Quarters Embassy was quiet, but Wang Chong knew that it was one of the most heavily guarded places in the Central Plains. Countless Imperial Army experts were stationed here. Looking from afar, even the air above the Four Quarters Embassy seemed slightly distorted, and even the sun, moon, and stars seemed a little bizarre. The Four Quarters Embassy looked simple, and one could easily climb over the walls. However, one would realize that this place was definitely a tiger's den. One might be able to enter easily, but there was no guarantee that one would be able to come out alive. Every time Wang Chong entered this place, he would feel as though he had stepped into an impenetrable fortress. To think that I would finally be back here. Looking at the Four Quarters Embassy, Wang Chong was in a daze. A complicated expression flashed across his eyes. Wang Chong had always disliked the Four Quarters Embassy. The reason was simple. The atmosphere here was too solemn. Every time he entered this place, it didn't feel like a family gathering. Instead, it felt more like a court assembly. Furthermore, grandfather, or perhaps the old master, this was how Wang Chong addressed him in his heart, was too upright and incorruptible. Wang Chong's rebelliousness, ignorance, and troublemaking didn't appeal to the old master. As a result, Wang Chong felt as though he was invisible every time he came here. No one paid attention to him and no one cared about him. Due to this reason, Wang Chong disliked coming here even more. There were many things that one would only realize their importance after losing them. It was only after the old master passed away that Wang Chong truly felt the weight of the old master. The entire Wang clan lost its pillar of support, and in an instant the world collapsed. Only then did Wang Chong realize what the old master meant to the clan. Humans had to learn from their mistakes in order to grow. Many years later, when Wang Chong was no longer young, Wang Chong finally understood his grandfather's intention. He had lived an upright and incorruptible life. Wealth, status, and authority held no attraction to him at all. No one disliked having a house full of grandchildren, and no one disliked enjoying a blissful old age. The reason why he persisted for so long in the Four Quarters Embassy despite his old age was for this family, for the descendants of the Wang clan. Thus, in his previous life, when he revisited the Four Quarters Embassy many years later, the Four Quarters Embassy was no longer guarded by the Imperial Army, and it was overgrown with weeds, turning it into an ordinary courtyard. Big uncle and little uncle kneeled on the ground and burst into tears. That scene was something that Wang Chong would never forget for the rest of his life. In the past, Wang Chong was filled with awe and respect for this place. But as someone who had reincarnated, Wang Chong's feelings toward this place were completely different. It wasn't just the intimacy that flowed through his bloodline. To Wang Chong, this place also contained a sliver of hope for the empire. If Wang Chong wanted to change the fate of the empire, change the fate of the Central Plains, he needed the approval and help of that elder in the Four Quarters courtyard. This was Wang Chong's only chance. Jaya! A shout sounded from outside the carriage. Wang Chong's eyes widened for a moment, but he soon recovered. Retracting his head, he sat on the carriage with his mother and slowly headed toward the Four Quarters Embassy. This wasn't the first time the Wang clan's carriage had entered the Four Quarters Embassy. Even in the Tang dynasty, there were few who didn't recognize the emblem on the carriage. However, they still had to go through strict procedures to verify it before allowing it in. Let's alight here. If Duke Zhou summons you, he'll inform you. Not too far after entering the Four Quarters Embassy, several Imperial Army soldiers stood guard. Several black-armored Imperial Army soldiers had grim and expressionless faces, blocking the way. This was the periphery of the Four Quarters Embassy. Even though they were from the Wang clan, they could only walk this far. They had to wait for the summons from inside. Even though Wang Chong wasn't used to this, he knew that this was a rule set by the Holy Emperor. But Wang Chong knew that this was a rule set down by the Sage Emperor to prevent people from trying to take advantage of the chaos and sneak in. The Holy Emperor viewed the Four Quarters Embassy with great importance. All of you wait here. Big Aunt and the others will be here soon, and we'll all enter together. Remember not to run around. Madame Wang instructed from the carriage. She was already used to all of this, so she wasn't surprised by it. Wang Chong and his little sister nodded their heads before opening the carriage door and alighting. The Four Quarters Embassy was heavily guarded. With a single glance, one could see a sentry every 5 steps and a sentry every 10. There were Imperial Army guards everywhere, both in the open and in the shadows. These gazes scanned the area silently from all directions, and it felt as though one was being watched at all times. In his previous life, Wang Chong had always felt uncomfortable being watched. However, having lived 2 lives, Wang Chong had weathered many storms, so he didn't mind such surveillance. Mother, let me help you down. Wang Chong stood by the side of the carriage and helped his mother down. Madame Wang nodded her head in gratification. This child had truly grown up. If it was in the past, he wouldn't have been so sensible. Disregarding the Imperial Army guards, the interior of the Four Quarters Embassy was actually quite beautiful. The interior of the Four Quarters Embassy was filled with lush greenery, and between the trees, neatly paved bluestone paths could be seen. By the sides of the paths, there were many craggy artificial mountains and boulders that exuded an ancient charm. Clear streams of flowing water, carefully constructed by the Bureau of Works, flowed through the surroundings. Wang Chong glanced around, and he could even see clusters of meticulously cultivated black bamboos. They were lush and vigorous, exuding vitality. The old master loved peace and quiet, and he was skilled in both literature and martial arts when he was young. These were all things that he liked. Lululu. Just as he was waiting, the rumbling of a carriage sounded from behind him. Yo, isn't this Xu Hua? You sure came early. It's father-in-law's birthday, Xu Hua. You sure put in a lot of effort. Before Wang Chong could see the person, a sarcastic and eccentric voice sounded from the green carriage. Wang Chong turned his head and saw a middle-aged woman with a hairpin and an air of nobility poking her head out of the carriage window. Her eyes were staring at him with a hint of harshness in them. Big Aunt. A thought flashed across Wang Chong's mind. The person who peeked her head out from the carriage was none other than Wang Chong's big aunt, Xing Yuan Chun. If Big Uncle had always been fond of him in his previous life, Big Aunt hated him. This kind of hatred wasn't limited to just Wang Chong, but the entire Wang clan. Big brother, second brother, father, mother, and little sister were all included. In fact, even after the Wang clan fell into trouble, Big Aunt's attitude hadn't changed at all. When the Wang clan was in trouble, everyone was more than willing to work together. Even though they were starving, Big Aunt was always nagging at them. When it was time to eat, she made sure to eat the best. And when it was time to pick out food, she made sure to pick the largest portion. When the Wang clan fell into trouble, everyone was skinny, but Big Aunt even gained a few caddies. Due to this reason, she and Wang Chong hated one another. Sister-in-law must be joking. Today is father-in-law's birthday, so how could Xu Hua dare to be late? Hearing her brother and sister-in-law's words, Madame Wang's face darkened, but she didn't dare to refute them. Xing Yuan Chun was the daughter-in-law of the Wang clan's first wife. In the feudal society, her status was much higher than hers. Mother, why are you being so courteous with her? Big Aunt, today is grandfather's 70th birthday. As an elder, you actually came so late for such an important event. Aren't you being a little too negligent? Wang Chong tugged at his mother and retorted rudely. His mother couldn't speak, but as a child, he didn't have much to fear. Even if grandfather were to blame him, he would only say that he was inexperienced and that it wasn't a big deal. That's right, that's right. Why are you scolding my mother? His little sister clenched her fists and argued indignantly. Xing Yuan Chun didn't expect Wang Chong to interject and criticize her for being late. She angrily pointed a finger at Wang Chong and said with a frosty face, "You two little things, do you still have any respect for your elders? How dare you speak like that? I'm speaking with your mother. Do you have the right to interrupt? Zhao Shuhua, is this how you teach your children? Enough!" At this moment, a cold and authoritative voice sounded from the carriage. The quarreling trio immediately quietened down. Today is father's birthday, so no one is allowed to argue here. Xing Yuan Chun, shut your mouth. Wang Chong, you're not allowed to speak as well. It was Wang Chong's big uncle, Wang General as an influential official of the royal court. His words carried an air of authority. Yes, big uncle. Wang Chong bowed and fell silent. Compared to before, big uncle's tone was much more relaxed, and he didn't seem to be blaming Wang Chong. Clearly, Wang Chong's suggestion to help big uncle and cousin wasn't in vain. But for some reason, Wang Chong felt that there was something weighing heavily on his big uncle's mind when he spoke. Big brother is right. Xu Hua has been rude. Wang Chong's mother Zhao Xu Hua also bowed. Even though Wang Chong's big uncle Wang Zhen was strict and inflexible, and he didn't have a good relationship with the Wang clan in the past, he wasn't as harsh and arrogant as Xing Yuanchun. Thus, there wasn't much conflict between him and Wang Chong's mother. Wang Zhen, your elbows are out. Do you even know how to talk? She's talking back to me. A sharp and discordant voice sounded from the carriage. Even though big uncle Wang Zhen was speaking up, Wang Chong's big aunt, Xing Yuanchun, didn't buy it, and her voice was filled with dissatisfaction. Mother, stop. At this moment, another voice from the carriage grumbled. It's cousin. Wang Chong could tell that it was his grandfather's 70th birthday. It was impossible for cousin Wang Zhuyan to miss out on such a huge occasion. Fine. To think that even you would speak up for an outsider. Stinky lass, I'll teach you a lesson. Big Aunt's face was filled with anger, and as she spoke, she stretched out her finger to pinch her cheek. Following which, a scream of shock sounded from her cousin, as though she was really pinched in pain. Then, a series of nagging reprimands followed. Yo, isn't that Xu Hua? There's also Yuan Chun. Chapter 88. Big Aunt. Wang Chong turned his head around, a delighted look on his face. The ones who came were none other than Wang Chong's big aunt Wang Rushuang and Uncle Li Lin. He Chonger and little Yao are here too. Wang Chong's big aunt looked at Wang Chong and his little sister passionately, as though she was her own son. Hey Yuan Chun, they're just children, there's no need to get angry with them. Just let them have their way. Today is father's birthday, and this is a huge matter. Let's discuss how we can ensure that nothing goes wrong so that father will be happy. Big Aunt quickly stepped forward to mediate the situation. As she spoke, she secretly winked at Wang Chong. Wang Chong chuckled inwardly. Understanding her intentions, he quickly pulled his little sister to the side. In his previous life, Big Aunt and Big Aunt had always been close. However, everything had changed. Wang Chong had helped Uncle Li Lin to be transferred out of the North Gate, and he had even been promoted along with Zhao Fengchen. In the eyes of Big Aunt Wang Rushuang, wasn't Wang Chong even closer to her than her own son? In Big Uncle's carriage, the voices suddenly stopped. Hey, Rushuang is here. Big Aunt Xing Yuanchun popped her head out of the window and looked in the direction of Big Aunt's carriage. Her eyes were filled with warmth, completely different from how she treated Wang Chong's mother. The old master had 3 sons and 1 daughter, and Big Aunt Wang Rushuang was the old master's only daughter. The old master's bloodline flowed through her body. Furthermore, Big Aunt Wang Rushuang was a married daughter, so she wouldn't vie for the old master's fortune. As such, she didn't have much of a conflict with Xing Yuanchun. In this aspect, she was completely different from Wang Chong's mother. Hehe, it's been a while since we last met, and Yuanchun's complexion seems to be getting better. You don't look like someone of our age. Look at me, even my white hair is growing out. Is that so? Big Aunt, don't say that. You don't look old at all. First Aunt's face was rosy and full of smiles. Just as he was speaking, a cold snort suddenly came from the carriage. With a bang, the door of the green carriage was pushed open from the inside. A tall and slender figure appeared at the entrance of the carriage, emitting a majestic aura. This sudden turn of events caused everyone to be stunned. Cousin. Wang Chong and his little sister stood at the side of the road in a daze. Took them a while to react. The person who appeared at the entrance of the carriage with an impatient face was none other than Wang Chong's cousin, Wang Li. This child. How can you do things in front of your aunt? Aren't you going to call me aunt? Eldest Aunt Xing Yuanchun called out. However, Wang Chong's cousin Wang Li acted as though he didn't hear anything. He didn't even glance at Big Aunt Wang Rushuang and left the carriage. Wang Li was the eldest son of the Wang clan, and he was an official as well. The old master had once bestowed a special favor upon him, So the imperial army guards didn't even bother to look at him before allowing him to leave. In the blink of an eye, Wang Li disappeared into the bamboo forest. Throughout the entire process, no one spared him a second glance. It should be something from before. A thought flashed across Wang Chang's mind. No one knew better than him just how ambitious cousin Wang Li was in his desire for fame and glory. In the third generation, cousin Wang Li had always been competing with his two elder brothers, especially his eldest brother. Just that, despite being the eldest son of the Wang clan, cousin Wang Li had never been a match for his eldest brother, Wang Fu. Even his official rank couldn't compare to his eldest brother. Due to the Yao clan, his promotion was ruined. It was easy to imagine cousin Wang Li's emotions. This child, Big Aunt Xing Yuanchun, stared at cousin Wang Li's disappearing silhouette in embarrassment. Enough! Let's stop talking and get off the carriage. It was Big Uncle Wang Jin's voice. As soon as he said those words, he stood up and walked out of the carriage. Before coming out, he glanced at Wang Chong and nodded his head. Then, with a troubled look on his face, he walked forward. As the eldest son of the Wang clan and an influential official in the royal court, Big Uncle would often visit the Four Quarters Embassy to consult the old master on political issues. As such, he was an exception to the rules of the Four Quarters Embassy. In just a moment, Big Uncle passed through the security barrier and disappeared into the bamboo forest. Rushuang, let's go in as well? There's no need for that. I'll wait for fourth brother here. It's rare for him to return from Tianzhu Mountain for the old master's birthday banquet. Let's wait for him. Wang Rushuang shook her head. She glanced at Wang Chong with a deep gaze. Xing Yuanchun didn't insist on it. She got off the carriage, and when she passed by Wang Chong's mother, she harumphed coldly before walking into the bamboo forest. Wang Zhuyan was the last one to come out. Only after Big Aunt disappeared did she sneak out. Without Big Aunt Xing Yuanchun's presence, the atmosphere was much more harmonious. Aunt. Wang Zhuyan walked up to Wang Chong's mother and said apologetically, "My mother's words were a little harsh, but she isn't a bad person. I'll apologize on her behalf, so please don't take it to heart." Hee, silly child, why are you apologizing? How could I? Wang Chong's mother shook her head with a smile. Indeed, Shuhua Yuanchun's personality is just like that. Just let it go in one ear and out the other. Big Aunt Wang Rushuang walked over with a smile. The aunt and niece chatted for a moment before their gazes turned to look at Wang Chong simultaneously, getting Wang Chong's heart skipped a beat. Big Aunt was still fine, but cousin Wang Zhuyan's gaze was filled with malicious intent. It was as though she was looking at a huge piece of meat. TSK. Isn't this our family's little Taozhu? Why, have you forgotten about second sister after earning some money? How can that be? An embarrassed expression appeared on Wang Chong's face. In the eyes of Wang Chong's big aunt, uncle and mother, they couldn't help but chuckle. Even though Wang Chong was currently in the limelight, resolving the crisis of the Wang clan and earning a huge sum of money, he couldn't bring himself to do so in front of his cousin Wang Zhuyan. It was as though he had been restrained. Where's my share? You've earned so much money, surely you haven't forgotten about me, right? Wang Zhuyan stretched out her hand and harumphed, gesturing as though she was counting money. How can that be? I've been keeping the money for second sister's rouge. When second sister needs it, I'll send it over. Wang Chong said. That's more like it. As Wang Zhuyan spoke, she couldn't help but burst into laughter. Wang Zhuyan laughed and the others followed suit. Only Wang Chong was bewildered. Right, don't leave after the birthday banquet. I have something to ask of you, Wang Zhuyan suddenly said. Wang Chong was surprised. It was rare for his cousin to look for him, especially on an important occasion like grandfather's 70th birthday banquet. I understand. Even though Wang Chong was perplexed, he quickly nodded his head. When she spoke, although she was smiling, her expression was very serious. Usually, when such an expression appeared on her face, it meant that the matter was extremely important. Wang Chong didn't dare to be careless. Remember, don't forget it. Only then did Wang Zhuyan nod her head in satisfaction. After bidding farewell to Wang Chong's mother and big aunt Wang Rushuang, she dived into the bamboo forest. After cousin Wang Zhuyan left, Wang Chong's big aunt Wang Rushuang followed suit. However, different from her cousin, Her gaze was extremely gentle, and it could even be said to be filled with gratitude. "Child, thank you." Big Aunt Wang Rushuang was moved. Without her big brother and sister-in-law around, there was no need for her to hide it. For her husband, Li Lin's matter, she had pleaded with the old master countless times. However, the old master's personality was too stubborn. Once he had decided on something, it was impossible for him to change his mind. Wang Rushuang was on the verge of despair. In fact, she even felt that her husband would die of old age in the North Gate. However, things happened too abruptly. Wang Rushuang didn't expect that the one who resolved this problem for her would be her rebellious and profligate nephew. In just a short period of time, her husband, Li Lin, was transferred out of the North Gate and even promoted by a rank. Even now, Wang Rushuang still found it inconceivable. "And there's no need to say that. We are a family. Furthermore, Uncle has helped me as well." As Wang Chong spoke, he glanced at Uncle behind him. Wang Chong was speaking the truth, but in the ears of Big Aunt Wang Rushuang, it turned into humility. She felt even more grateful to him. "This child. Chong, if you have time in the future, pay Aunt Duo a visit. You should get closer to your cousin Wang Liang." "Wang Liang, your cousin is here as well. Why aren't you getting down?" At the end of his words, he turned around and bellowed at the carriage behind him. "Wait a moment. Wait for me to finish making this wooden bird. This kind of thing is very popular in the capital right now. It costs 5 taels of silver each, and if it can fly, it'll be 10. I'll make a few more, and I'll surely be able to earn quite a bit of money." The voice in the carriage seemed to be extremely busy and focused. "Wang Liang." Wang Rushuang flew into a rage and her face steeled. Listening by the side, Wang Chong couldn't help but burst into laughter. The only one who could say such words was his cousin, Wang Liang. Cousin Wang Liang wasn't skilled in literature or martial arts, but he was extremely interested in making money through business. He was extremely sensitive to the movements in the market. He was always able to find a business opportunity and earn a sum from it. The only problem was, just like what he said, he could only earn 5 taels of silver each time. It had always been a small business. The sound of wood creaking could still be heard from the carriage, and cousin Wang Liang was still busy inside. This child. Big Aunt Wang Rushuang felt helpless as well. "Forget it, Shuhua. It's about time. I'm afraid that fourth brother will only arrive very late. Let's go in first." Not too far away, a few Imperial Army experts opened up a path for them. The old master had finally sent word that they could enter. The carriage started moving and the group walked in. The old master's residence was called Erudite Pavilion. It was heavily guarded, and it was hard to tell how many experts were guarding it. The moment Wang Chong and his mother walked in, Big Uncle and Big Aunt were already waiting in the main hall. Along with cousin Wang Zhuyan and cousin Wang Li, they stood in a straight line, and the atmosphere was solemn. Chapter 89. At the very front of the hall were 2 purple armchairs. With a single glance, Wang Chong saw 2 dignified silver-haired elders seated on the armchairs. "Grandfather," a crisp voice sounded. Before Wang Chong could react, his little sister had already dashed over and pounced into the embrace of the 2 elders. "Hey, look who's here. Isn't this our little Yao? Little lass, you finally remembered to visit grandfather." In the hall, the dignified silver-haired old man opened his arms and embraced the Wang family's little sister. He placed her on his knees with an amiable expression on his face. On the other hand, Wang family's little Yao didn't stand on ceremony either. She hugged the 2 silver-haired elders tightly as she called out for her grandfather and grandmother. Upon seeing this sight, everyone in the hall had complicated expressions on their faces. Even Wang Chong's cousin Wang Li couldn't help but reveal a look of envy. The old master had a strict personality. Before him, no one dared to breathe loudly. Even Wang Chong's big uncle Wang Zhen was the same. In the entire Wang clan, only Wang clan's little Yao was an exception. Every time they met, she would kick up a fuss. Yet, the old master and old madam didn't mind it at all. On the contrary, they liked her a lot. This was his little sister's unique ability, and no one could learn it. "Father, I'm here to offer my blessings to you. May your fortune be as boundless as the sea, and you live as long as the mountains." Wang Chong's big aunt and uncle carried 2 large longevity peaches and respectfully offered their blessings. The old master had an incorruptible personality, and he didn't like those extravagant and luxurious things. In the past, there were people who had gifted him those expensive gifts, but not only were the gifts returned, they were even reprimanded. Thus, even though it was his 70th birthday, no one dared to violate the old master's taboo and hold a lavish celebration. The gifts were all simple and unadorned items. Besides, the old master didn't like them either. You're too kind." The old master nodded slightly as he received the peach. His expression didn't change much. Everyone in the Wang clan knew that this was the old master's temper. His temperament was harsh and serious. Even on such a joyous occasion as his 70th birthday, he did not reveal too much of his emotions. After uncle and aunt finished offering their blessings, they brought cousin Wang Liang to the side in a well-behaved manner. Since the old man didn't say anything, the others didn't dare to say anything. "Grandpa, grandson Wang Chong, I wish you happiness as vast as the East Sea, and longevity as long as the southern mountain pine." When it was time to celebrate his mother's birthday, Wang Chong suddenly stepped forward and said, "Oh." As soon as Wang Chong finished speaking, everyone in the room immediately looked over, including the old master and old madam who were sitting on the armchairs. For the first time they noticed Wang Chong, and a strange look appeared in their eyes. This time, when the people of the Wang clan came to offer their blessings, everyone said, "Blessings as vast as the East Sea, longevity as long as the South Mountain." Wang Chong was the same, but he added a few words at the end, and the entire mood instantly changed. The two of them had heard plenty of birthday blessings, but this was the first time they had heard such a speech. Old master, listen carefully. This child is very similar to your demeanor back then." Old madam suddenly said with a smile. "Not bad." The old master nodded with a smile, not saying much. But by the side, Wang Chong's big uncle, big aunt, and uncle were visibly moved. Everyone in the Wang clan knew that in order to prevent the Wang clan from getting too arrogant, the old master rarely praised others. Even for Wang Chong's big uncle, the old master would only nod his head slightly most of the time. A simple "not bad" might sound like nothing much, but those who were familiar with the old master knew that this was already a rare sight. "Also, grandson has a gift for you," Wang Chong said. The moment Wang Chong said those words, the atmosphere in the room suddenly changed. By the side, Wang Chong's big aunt, Wang Rushuang, signaled to Wang Chong with her eyes, and Wang Chong's big uncle also fell silent. On the other hand, even though Wang Chong's big aunt had a displeased expression on her face a moment ago, she was sneering coldly by the side. Everyone in the Wang clan knew that the old master was upright and incorruptible, and he never liked to accept gifts. Not only did he not accept gifts from outsiders, even if they were from the Wang clan, he would never accept any gifts other than on a joyous occasion. On top of that, he only accepted gifts from Wang Chong's uncles and uncles. As for the younger generation, he didn't accept any gifts at all. He didn't want the younger generation to be tainted by the customs of the officialdom from a young age, forcing them to learn how to reciprocate gifts. Who would have thought that just after the old master praised Wang Chong would immediately break the taboo? Children really can't stand compliments. Wang Chong's big aunt said sinisterly by the side. Seated on the chair, the old master stared at Wang Chong expressionlessly. Even the smile on the old lady's face retracted. "What gift did you give him?" Unexpectedly, the old master suddenly asked. His gaze was fixated on the rectangular object in Wang Chong's hands. No one could tell what he was thinking about. A saber and a sword. Kneeling on the floor, Wang Chong said honestly, "Hong." The moment Wang Chong said those words, the entire hall burst into an uproar. "Chonger, what are you doing?" Wang Chong's mother's face darkened. She had noticed that when Wang Chong boarded the carriage, he was holding a long object tightly wrapped in a long cloth. Just that, Zhao Shuhua didn't expect it to be a saber and a sword. Sabers and swords brought about a calamity of blood. For Wang Chong to take out such a weapon in front of the old master, it was a grave offense. Wang Chong backed down. Wang Chong's big uncle Wang Zhen bellowed. Previously, Wang Chong had helped him resolve the matter regarding his eldest son, Wang Li, to prevent the Yao clan from making use of him. As a result, Wang Zhen's view of Wang Chong changed drastically. That was also the reason why he stepped forward to stop Wang Chong's big aunt from ridiculing him in the carriage. But to gift a sword and a saber on such a joyous occasion like his 70th birthday, this was too ridiculous. Even though Wang Chong was still young, it was unacceptable for him to do such a thing. Chong, how can you be so insensible? Aren't you cursing your grandfather? Hurry up and keep the item and apologize to grandfather. Wang Chong's big aunt said anxiously. This child was too young and rash. Not too long ago, his outstanding performance had caught the attention of the old master. In fact, due to his birthday speech, the old master even made an exception and praised him. How could he make such a mistake so quickly? Wasn't this destroying his own future? Wang Rushuang had a good impression of Wang Chong. Wang Rushuang didn't think that Wang Chong was doing it on purpose when he gifted a sword and a saber on his birthday. Most likely, it was due to the fact that the young were ignorant and didn't understand such taboos. Unlike the old master, the old lady had an amiable personality. But at this moment, she retracted her smile and pursed her lips tightly. Wang Chong's cousin Wang Li didn't say anything. Instead, he glanced at Wang Chong and frowned. On the other hand, Wang Zhuyan was shocked by Wang Chong's actions. She followed behind Wang Chong's big aunt and shot him a meaningful glance. Why did you give me a sword and saber? The old master asked gravely. The atmosphere in the room grew even more stifling. Wang Chong held onto the sword and kneeled on the floor, but there wasn't any change in his expression. What grandson gifted is a heavy sword. Grandson thinks that this sword is the most suitable weapon for grandfather, and it can best express the feelings in grandson's heart. Before the others in the room could react, the old master was able to tell what Wang Chong was talking about. And Wang Chong's big uncle couldn't help but glance at him in astonishment. This nephew of his was truly surprising him. A heavy sword without an edge is just a simple work of art. Wang Chong's words were undoubtedly implying that the sword he gifted wasn't sharpened. A truly powerful sword didn't need to be sharpened to possess immense might. As for those truly exquisite weapons, they didn't need to be polished meticulously either. Just like the saying, the chest is as empty as a valley, while the abdomen is filled with knowledge and wisdom. Could it be that Wang Chong was trying to say that even though the old master had already retired and lived in such a simple and unadorned residence, he was still an influential official who wielded great authority in the empire and was respected by the masses? His status had already reached a level where he didn't need to be rewarded with a high official's salary, the purple ribbon fish token, or the congratulations of the officials. Just like the heavy sword in Wang Chong's hand. If this nephew of his really had such thoughts, and that was why he gifted the old master a heavy sword as a gift, then this was truly incredible. This was something that even Wang Zhen hadn't thought of before. Without a doubt, regardless of whether it was a birthday peach or anything else, there was nothing more fitting for the old master's heart than this. As expected, the old master seemed to have thought of this as well, and a smile appeared on his face. Bring it over, the old master said as he stretched out his hand. Wang Chong kneeled over and respectfully placed the sword into the old master's hand. This was something that Wang Chong was willing to do. Wang Chong's respect for the old master came from the bottom of his heart. There were many things that one could only understand after many years. Regarding the old master, Wang Chong only came to understand many things after the old master passed away. In the Tang dynasty there were two true legends. One was Yao Feng's grandfather, the pillar of the Yao clan, Old Master Yao, and the other was his grandfather. Everyone respectfully addressed him as Duke Jiu. He had lived a life of vicissitudes and weathered many storms. He had once defended the borders of northern Tibet and fought against two Turkic khaganates. He had also once criticized the current situation in the royal court with impassioned speeches, stripping away the old prejudices and ushering in a new atmosphere in the royal court. Back then, there was a coup in the royal court, and when the empire was on the brink of collapse, he stood his ground and supported the current holy emperor, resulting in the unprecedented prosperity of the empire. His students and acquaintances were all over the world. When he was at his peak, he retreated bravely. He had lived an honest and upright life, and he was respected by the empire. In fact, even after he retired, the current emperor couldn't resist building this four-quarters embassy in order to retain him. Every historical figure had a prototype. Wang Chong was once perplexed as to why the old master wielded such great influence in the royal court, but he couldn't find such a person in history. It was only many years later that a name flashed across Wang Chong's mind. Only then did Wang Chong realize who his grandfather was. Zhang Jiuling. He was a famous minister in the history of the Tang dynasty, as well as the last of his generation. But in this world he was known as Wang Jiuling, and everyone respectfully addressed him as. Chapter 90. Everyone in the hall was dumbfounded. No one could understand what was going on. In the past, the old master would have already flown into a rage. Yet, at this moment, he still had a pleasant expression on his face. Of the entire hall, only Wang Chong's cousin was the first to react. He seemed to have guessed something and a contemplative look appeared on his face. Wang Chong's big uncle Wang Zhen happened to see this sight and he sighed deeply. A complicated emotion flashed across his eyes. Oh, there are words on the sword? The old master had just removed the black cloth wrapping the sword when he noticed a few ancient words on the sheath. His interest was piqued. Yes, grandson has given this sword a name. Wang Chong lowered his head and replied. Kingdom Knight. The old master removed the layers of black cloth and took out the heavy sword. There weren't any luxurious gems or gems on the sheath. The sheath of the heavy sword was black and simple. On the scabbard there were 2 large characters written in ancient seal script. The old man's eyes lit up when he saw it. Kingdom Knight, this sword shall be known as the Kingdom Knight sword. At the same moment, Wang Chong's voice sounded in everyone's ears. Chonger, how did you do it? Grandfather is a renowned minister of the empire, and he has contributed greatly to the empire. Even His Majesty is respectful of him. How can his illustrious achievements be summed up by the words Kingdom Knight? How did you forge the sword? You're too careless. Before the old master could speak, Wang Chong's big uncle Wang Zhen saw the words on the sheath and frowned. His eyes lit up when he saw Wang Chong's previous performance, and he couldn't help but praise the latter for putting in the effort. But at this point he realized that something was amiss. His father was a renowned minister, and in the entire Tang dynasty, the only one who could match up to him was the Yao clan's old master Yao. Using the term Kingdom Knight to describe his father would be underestimating his father's contributions and standing in the Tang dynasty. In the end, Wang Chong was still a 15-year-old child. Even though he was talented in other aspects, he was still lacking in political affairs. Uncle is wrong. Nephew's sword is not used to boast about grandfather's contributions, but to express grandfather's thoughts. Wang Chong knelt on the ground and said nothing. He looked at his grandfather. When the Lord worries, his subjects will be humiliated. When the Lord is humiliated, his subjects will die. The monarch was worried about the affairs of the state, and the officials took it as a humiliation. The monarch was humiliated, and the officials repaid it with death. Therefore, during the Western Han dynasty, when the Han envoy Lai Dan was killed, Chong Hui, alone disregarding his own life and death, led the troops of the western region to destroy Kucha. This is a national scholar. During the reign of Emperor Xian of the Western Han dynasty, the Han envoy Gu Ji was killed. Chun Tang wrote a memorial to the emperor. Those who openly offend the strong Han must be killed no matter how far away. During the reign of Emperor Ming of the Eastern Han dynasty, Ban Chao was ordered to go to the western regions. He met the envoy of the Xiongnu in Shanshan. The Xiongnu army was strong and their defense was tight. Ban Chao said, "Nothing ventured, nothing gained." Leading 72 Han soldiers, he slaughtered the Xiongnu that night and conquered the western regions. This was also a Kingdom Knight. If everyone in the world was a national scholar, why would grandfather be so persistent in retreating? Grandfather wouldn't need to retreat. His Majesty wouldn't need to establish this 4 quarters embassy, and our great Tang wouldn't need to worry about the world being unable to prosper. Kneeling on the ground, Wang Chong said with a stern expression. Even though these words were said by Wang Chong to his grandfather, they were also the thoughts in Wang Chong's heart. Wang Chong had always been unable to understand his grandfather's thoughts. It was not until many years later, When he was appointed as the Grand Marshal of the world and sat in that position, that he truly understood his grandfather's thoughts at that time. Seek for one's duty in one's position. When one sat on that position, what he considered was no longer his personal interests but the country and the world. In his previous life, the Central Plains had been through a calamity, and by the time Wang Chong took over, the Central Plains was already on the verge of collapse. Even though Wang Chong racked his brains and gave his all, he couldn't save the Central Plains alone. Even after several decades, he was still unable to change the fate of the Central Plains. This was the deepest regret in Wang Chong's heart. Be it in his previous life or this one, it was the same. There were countless nights in the past when Wang Chong thought of the heavy responsibility he carried on his shoulders, and he would find it hard to sleep. When he was unable to hold on alone, Wang Chong couldn't help but think how great it would be if there was someone in the world who could replace him and become his right-hand man. Just like what Wang Chong had said, if everyone in the world was like a kingdom knight, how could he have been defeated? And how could the Central Plains have fallen into the enemy's hands? If everyone in the world was like a kingdom knight, everything would have been different. Just that Wang Chong couldn't say all of this out. He could only make use of his grandfather's birthday to speak of it. In this world, he was probably the only one who understood his grandfather, but his grandfather might not necessarily understand him. Everyone in the room was confused at the start, but as Wang Chong spoke, they couldn't help but be visibly moved. Ha ha ha. Good, good, good. Chong, well said. Well said. Initially, the old master was expressionless, but at this moment, holding onto the sword that Wang Chong had gifted him, he couldn't help but burst into laughter. To think that I, Wang Jiuling, would have such a soulmate as my grandson at such an old age. Jenner, you don't understand, none of you understand. In the entire world, Chonger is probably the only one who truly understands me. The old master laughed heartily, greatly comforted. Wang Chong's big uncle was astonished. The old master had a strict personality, and this was the first time he saw the old master laughing so happily. Also, Jenner, there's something that you're wrong about. Zhuozhuan, 16 years of Duke Changong : as the saying goes, with the nation's scholars they are unstoppable. Not only is Chonger's words not belittling me, it's the greatest compliment to me. Chong, get up. I'll accept this nation scholar sword. The old master stood up from his seat, and under everyone's astonished gazes, for the first time, he made an exception and bent down to help Wang Chong up. Father! Wang Rushuang widened her eyes. She stared at the old master, then at Wang Chong, who was being helped up from the ground. She couldn't believe her eyes. The old master was an important official of the country, an existence akin to a mountain of prestige. Ever since he was young, he had never received such treatment, not even when an official was around. Even the four of them had never received such treatment from their father. Wang Rushuang couldn't understand why her father would view Wang Chong in such high regard just by gifting him a sword. This lad. Staring at Wang Chong, Wang Rushuang was truly astonished. Women didn't understand politics, but Wang Rushuang knew that Wang Chong must have done something incredible. By the side, Li Lin was astonished as well. He had seen Wang Chong's performance with his own eyes, and even Zhao Fengchen of the Imperial Army was full of praise for him. However, Zhao Fengchen and the old master couldn't be compared in the same breath. Chonger's words have probably touched the old master's heart, Li Lin muttered as he fell into deep thought. He had to admit that Wang Chong had refreshed his view of him. On the other hand, Wang Chong's big aunt, Xing Yuanchun, was different. Seeing the old master personally standing up to help Wang Chong up, her face darkened. On the other hand, the old madam, who had pursed her lips tightly upon hearing that Wang Chong would gift a sword on a joyous occasion, couldn't help but chuckle at this moment. Yay! 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 The Wang family's little sister didn't understand what had just happened. Nor did she understand what Wang Chong had said. Seeing their grandfather and grandmother rejoicing, everyone was delighted as well. They raised their fists in the embrace of the two elders and cheered excitedly. The solemn atmosphere from a moment ago had frightened her so much that she didn't dare to move at all. This child. At this moment, Wang Chong's mother couldn't help but rub her eyes in delight. She was so anxious over the matter that she nearly burst into tears. Come, Chonger, come over and stand beside your big uncle. Stand together with grandfather. The old master held onto Wang Chong's hand and said, "Shu Hua, you should join us as well." "Yes, Gong." Wang Chong's mother was agitated. She felt both joy and pride in her heart. In the past, she would always be a yes man during her father-in-law's birthday banquet, fearing that she would do something wrong. After marrying into the Wang family for so many years, this was the first time the old master had paid so much attention to her, especially mentioning her name. "Grandfather, I think I should stand together with mother." Wang Chong looked at his mother and suddenly said, Go on." The old master was taken aback, but he didn't stop him. Instead he smiled. Of all virtues, filial piety was the most important. He didn't think much of Wang Chong's actions. On the contrary, he was delighted. "Men, help me keep this sword. Place it at the highest point of my study. I'll keep it well." The old master beckoned for an imperial army guard by the side. His face was flushed, and his expression was completely different from before. Clearly, he was in a good mood. With so many descendants of the Wang clan gathered here, it was inevitable for the old master to ask about the affairs of the clan. Even the reticent old madam had an amiable expression on her face at this moment. This time it was time for the elders to speak. Other than cousin Wang Li, who could occasionally speak a few words, the other juniors like Wang Chong, Wang Liang, and Wang Zhuyan could only stand by the side obediently. "You're incredible." On the other side, Wang Chong's cousin Wang Liang was bored to death. When he glanced at Wang Chong, he secretly gave him a thumbs up. Wang Chong chuckled and returned the gesture. "How is it? Want to go out and play?" "It's fine." Wang Chong secretly gestured. "Go out for a breather?" "No." Wang Chong shook his head once more. In the past, he was just like Wang Liang, unable to stand such dull gatherings. Whenever cousin Wang Liang went out, he would often call him along. However, as someone who had lived a second life, Wang Chong's attitude was completely different. He had matured a lot. To Wang Chong, just seeing the members of the clan chatting here was already a great blessing. Only after losing something would one know regret. Only after regaining it would one know how to cherish it. Seeing Wang Chong ignore him, Wang Liang quickly lost interest and ignored him. Wang Chong chuckled. He already knew what would happen next. "Ah, my stomach hurts. Grandfather, grandmother, father and mother, I'll be going out first." Holding his stomach, Wang Liang suddenly grabbed the air. Without waiting for the people in the hall to speak, he ran out. In the great hall, everyone was still talking. Upon hearing this voice, everyone fell silent. The old master and old madam shook their heads, but they didn't stop him. On the other hand, Wang Chong's big mother's face was steely from anger. Chapter 91. Lord 4th Gongzi is here. Just as the group was speaking, a black-armored imperial army expert holding a thick halberd walked in from outside and respectfully knelt on the ground. "Oh!" Hearing those words, everyone's eyes lit up. The old master also sat up slightly. "Let him in. Little uncle is finally here." Wang Chong had been listening to the conversation of the crowd by the side, and upon hearing those words, his eyes widened in excitement. The Wang clan's four brothers consisted of Big Uncle, Big Aunt, Father and Little Uncle. Even though Little Uncle wasn't too far away from the capital, his situation was the most unique. Little Uncle was the commander of the Imperial Army training camp, and every year, he would shoulder the responsibility of selecting elites from the various regions and training them at Tianju Mountain. On top of that, he was also in charge of the training of the Imperial Army elites. As such, even though he wasn't too far away from the capital, as he was an Imperial Guard of the Holy Emperor, he didn't have much freedom. "Ha ha ha, brother, sister-in-law, big sister, brother-in-law. You're all here." Outside the Four Quarters Embassy, a hearty laughter sounded before anyone could be seen. In just a short while, a skinny but exceptionally capable young general with extremely tan skin strode in from the outside looking travel-worn. "Father, I've returned to offer my blessings." The young general strode in, and at the entrance of the main hall, he bowed respectfully to the old master and old madam. "Emir is back. It's good that you're back." Upon seeing the young general, the old madam was agitated. Looking at his tanned appearance, her heart ached for him. In the Wang clan, Wang Chong's little uncle was the youngest, and to date, he was unmarried. This had always been a thorn in the old madam's heart. Come in. You've worked hard on Tianju Mountain. Compared to the old madam, the old master was much calmer. Little uncle nodded and responded. His gaze swept around and soon fell on Wang Chong, who was in the crowd, and he secretly winked at him. Wang Chong couldn't help but chuckle. Among the elders, the one who was closest to Wang Chong was this uncle. He was the youngest, so the age gap between him and Wang Chong was also the smallest. Most importantly, little uncle had a cheerful temperament and never had any special expectations for the younger generation. In his previous life, when Wang Chong was at his most rebellious and mischievous, when a group of elders was disappointed in Wang Chong and criticized him, only his youngest uncle was not arrogant and even joked with Wang Chong. Therefore, among the elders, Wang Chong liked this uncle the most. Their relationship was also the closest. Little uncle walked over and stood next to Uncle Li Lin. Little uncle had been working hard on Tianju Mountain. It was rare for him to come back, so the old master couldn't help but ask about it. Little uncle answered them one by one. Now only Yan and the others haven't arrived yet. The Wang clan's members were all gathered together. The old master was clearly very happy, and the smile on his face grew wider. However, when these words fell into the ears of Wang Chong's big aunt, Xing Yuan-chun, she abruptly said, "Humph, isn't there another one in the prison? Wang." The moment Wang Chong's big aunt said those words, the temperature in the hall immediately plummeted. The old master, old granny, Wang Chong's big uncle, big aunt, uncle, and even little uncle fell silent. All of them turned their gazes toward Wang Chong's big aunt. On the other hand, Wang Chong's wife, Zhao Shuhua, felt a lump in her throat, and tears nearly fell from her eyes. Even Wang Chong fell silent. Wang Chong knew that Big Aunt was talking about his second brother, Wang Bei. Of the 4 siblings of the Wang clan, other than his youngest sister, Wang Chong had 2 older brothers. His eldest brother had inherited his father's legacy while fighting in the outer territories. His second brother was the most unique one, and he was locked in the prison. This had always been his mother's greatest source of pain. But everyone knew that it wasn't his fault that his second brother was locked in the prison for so long. In the Wang clan, everyone knew that Wang Chong's second brother was a taboo. Why are you looking at me? I didn't say anything wrong. Wang Chong's big aunt, Xing Yuan-chun, also knew that she had misspoken, but as the eldest wife, she refused to admit her mistake in front of so many people. Enough. Haven't you caused enough trouble? Big Uncle Wang Zhen said with a dark expression. She knew that the old master didn't like to hear such things, but she still intentionally brought it up. Wasn't she intentionally trying to make the old master unhappy? Yes means yes, no means no. Can't mother even say it out loud? Cousin Wang Li was displeased. He stood up to protect his mother and glared at his father. Wang Chong paid no heed to Big Aunt and the others. His mind was in turmoil. It should have been more than 3 months. Wang Chong thought. It's about time for me to pay him a visit. Of all of Wang Chong's siblings and kin, the one who was the most distant, aloof, and aloof wasn't Wang Chong's cousin Wang Li. It was Wang Chong's second brother, Wang Bei. If Wang Chong's older cousin had a proud and aloof personality that even his mother didn't care about him, then compared to his second brother, Wang Bei, he was like a child in the presence of a great sorcerer, a vast difference between them. Second brother Wang Bei wasn't close to anyone. Ever since he was young, he kept a distance from Wang Chong and the others. They didn't speak much and they didn't play together. Even with Wang Chong's big brother, they didn't have much to say to each other. But Wang Chong knew that he couldn't be blamed for this. His real second brother wasn't like that. Enough. In the main hall, the old master slammed his palm on the table. He couldn't bear to watch any longer. All of you get out. The old man's face was as cold as frost, and a terrifying aura burst out from his body. Even Wang Chong's big uncle Wang Zhen shuddered in fear, needless to say the others. The old man was well versed in both the pen and the sword. He was a top-notch expert at a young age. Back then, during the upheaval in the palace, it was the old man who single-handedly turned the tide and supported the current holy emperor to ascend to the throne. Although it had been so many years and he was already old, Coupled with the heavy injuries he had suffered in the war back then, his strength had regressed. However, he was still incomparable to the juniors present. The old man did not get angry easily. Now that he was angry, everyone kept quiet out of fear. Even Wang Chong lowered his head. Even though Wang Chong's aunt had been rebutting him previously, she couldn't help but feel suffocated and didn't dare to say anything when she saw the old man really getting angry. "Old master, calm down. It's rare for the children to visit you. Besides, Yuan Chun did not do it on purpose." The old lady hurriedly tried to smooth things over. "Jinmir Rushuang, hurry up and leave." Seeing that the old master was truly angry, no one dared to provoke him anymore. They hurriedly walked out of the hall. "Yaoer, you stay. Grandfather likes you the most. Coax grandfather so that he won't be angry." The Wang family's little sister also wanted to jump down from the embrace of the two elders, but she was stopped by the old lady. There were only a handful of females in the Wang clan. Furthermore, little sister was the youngest and had an innocent personality. She was the best at coaxing the old master and the old lady, so she was the only one who could stay. Today is the old master's 70th birthday. Must you make everyone unhappy? Walking out of the erudite pavilion, Wang Chong's big uncle Wang Jin's complexion was awful. The Wang clan had a strict upbringing, and the old master and the old lady had never quarreled in their entire lives. Thus, no matter what his wife Xing did, Wang Jin tolerated it. Furthermore, Xing Yuan Chun was in charge of the finances. The Wang clan, with its guards, maids and nannies, were all managed by Xing Yuan alone. There wasn't a single person in the Wang clan who was skilled in business. If not for Xing Yuan's unique talents, she would have been able to manage a few businesses in the capital to support the family. Wang Jin's salary was far from enough. This was also the reason why Wang Jin tolerated Xing Yuan. But this time she really went overboard. "Didn't I tell you about Lier's matter? If not for Chong'er's wits to guard against the Yao clan, he would have been made use of by the Yao clan. This child has helped us before, so why must you target him?" Furthermore, Zhao Shi had been targeting him ever since the carriage started. In the hall, she even touched on his sore spot, intentionally making the old master unhappy on his wedding day. "What are you trying to do?" Wang Jin wouldn't easily lash out at Xing Yuan, but this time he really couldn't hold himself back. "What am I trying to do?" Hearing Wang Jin's reprimand, Xing Yuan couldn't hold back her indignation and dissatisfaction anymore. "Wang Jin, if you could make arrangements for Lier, would there be a need for me to make a move? In the end, the matter with the Yao clan is all because you, as a father, didn't do a good job. If you had made the necessary arrangements, how could such a thing have happened? Lier is the eldest son of the Wang clan, the eldest son. But look at how he is acting now. It's one thing for Wang Fu of the Wang clan to have a higher standing than him, but what about second brother Wang Bei? He's in jail, and the old master is protecting him. Can't I speak about it? Besides, Wang Jin, don't forget. The children of third brother are Lier's greatest competitors. The old master's position and identity are destined to be inherited by Lier. Why should he share it with Wang Fu and Wang Bei? It's one thing if others don't fight for him, but as his mother, shouldn't I fight for him as well? Xing Yuan's eyes reddened, and her body trembled in anger. That's right. She was harsh, she was vicious, she didn't know where to draw the line, and she went against the old master. But all of this was for her child. Wang Jin couldn't understand it, but she could. The Wang clan was a clan of ministers and generals. If Lier wanted to inherit the old master's influence in the royal court and the resources he had left behind, third brother's clan would become his greatest competitor. This was something that couldn't be changed. Wang Jin was still furious at the start, but upon hearing Xing Yuan's words he fell silent. At the same time, on the other side of the Four Quarters embassy, Wang Chong finally met his little uncle. "Brat, not bad. I've heard about those matters while I was at Tianju Mountain." Wang Chong's little uncle, Wang Mi, walked over and patted Wang Chong's shoulder. Perhaps due to the age difference of only 20 years, it wasn't too ridiculous. As such, Wang Chong's little uncle didn't put on any airs of an elder. "Little uncle, you've gotten tanned again. If this goes on, you'll probably turn into a black man." Wang Chong joked, not showing the slightest restraint toward an elder. "Black man?" Little uncle was astonished. Chapter 92. Lad, are you mocking your little uncle? Even though little uncle didn't understand the meaning behind those words, he could tell that Wang Chong was referring to his dark skin. Thus, he couldn't help but tap him with his finger. Wang Chong simply smiled, not dodging. It's a pity that your second brother can't attend the old master's birthday banquet. Actually, your second brother wasn't like that in the past. Little uncle suddenly recalled something and sighed. I really didn't expect our clan's berserker syndrome to appear on him in this generation. Wang Chong fell silent. He couldn't speak of it in the main hall, but here the old master and old madam weren't around. Thus there wasn't much hesitation in speaking. There was an unspeakable secret in the Wang clan. And that was the berserker syndrome. No one knew how it started. They only knew that the berserker syndrome was inherited through the bloodline. Every generation, there would be a member of the Wang clan who would suffer from the berserker syndrome. Once that person was afflicted with the berserker syndrome, the killing intent in their bloodline would take control of them. Their eyes would turn crimson, and their killing intent would burst forth. They would fall into a frenzy, unable to control themselves. And Wang Chong's second brother, Wang Bei, was afflicted with the berserker syndrome. This illness was inherited. Due to this reason, the old master and old madam were filled with guilt toward Wang Bei. I intend to visit second brother in the prison, Wang Chong suddenly said. Oh, little uncle blinked for a moment before nodding his head. That's good too. Given your current capability and Zhao Fengchen's protection, you should be able to pay him a visit. Little uncle was currently training the Imperial Army at Tianzhu Mountain. In terms of connections, he wasn't inferior to Wang Chong at all. The deeds that Wang Chong had done in the Imperial Army couldn't be hidden from him at all. The only difference was that as the commander of Tianzhu Mountain, he was busy with military affairs. As such, it was impossible for him to leave Tianzhu Mountain as he pleased. Speaking of which, when will you give me a Wuxia steel sword? I'm at the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, and now people are begging me. Little uncle suddenly chuckled. It's fine if you want it. 100,000 gold taels for one. Wang Chong grinned and stretched out a hand, gesturing for money. Ha! So expensive. Little uncle was startled. He only knew that this kind of thing was very expensive, but he didn't ask in detail. He didn't expect it to be so expensive. Of course it would cost 100,000 taels to sell it to someone else, but if it was her uncle, I've already prepared that one for you, Wang Chong said with a sly smile. Ha ha ha, at least you have a conscience. That's more like it. When little uncle heard that Wang Chong had already prepared a Wuxia steel sword worth 100,000 taels for him, he immediately laughed happily. By the way, uncle, there's something I need to trouble you with, Wang Chong suddenly said with a serious expression. It was the old master's birthday, and it was rare for little uncle to come back. Wang Chong did not look for him for a joke. What is it? Little uncle smiled. I want to ask, uncle, do you know any retired instructors from the Pillar of Heaven's mountains? Wang Chong asked seriously. Wang. Upon hearing Wang Chong asking about such a sensitive topic, little uncle finally responded with a serious expression. Chonger, why are you asking about this? Little uncle asked warily. Anything that involved the Imperial Army or the royal family was no small matter. This was a taboo, I'm warning you, even though we're from a clan of ministers and generals, there are some things that you mustn't mess around with. Uncle, what are you thinking about? Do you think that I'm going to rebel? Wang Chong chuckled. In the capital, there were some daring nobles who had extended their influence into the Imperial Army, hoping to turn it into their private army. This was the Imperial Army they were talking about. During the reign of the previous emperor, he had confiscated several clans. This was something that many people knew about. However, what Wang Chong wanted to do was worlds apart from this. I want you to help me find some retired experts from the Pillar of Heaven's mountains to help me train some martial artists. There's no age limit, and it doesn't matter even if they're in their 70s or 80s. As long as they're willing to help with the training, Wang Chong said straightforwardly. Little Uncle Wang Mi was an instructor on the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, and he was in charge of the training of the Imperial Army. This was a huge advantage. However, it was a pity that no one thought of making use of this in his previous life. To be able to train the Imperial Army, one could imagine how powerful they were. More importantly, they were able to systematically groom a large number of experts. After his reincarnation, Wang Chong had contemplated for a very long time. If he wanted to deal with the dangers in the future, he had to gather powerful subordinates. It was impossible for him to find others for this, and the army was a taboo. There were too many restrictions on him. After much consideration, he could only groom them himself. In terms of groom, there was no one in the Central Plains who was more outstanding than the Imperial Army instructors on the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. Wang Chong didn't dare to touch the active instructors, but it was a different story for the retired Imperial Army instructors. Over the years, there were many retired instructors on the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. They had been enjoying the salary of the royal court for a long time, and yet they were left lying around. This was the greatest waste of resources. Thus, Wang Chong turned his attention to them. If he could gather these people together, he could make good use of them. In the future, this would be his greatest strength. What else could be more powerful than a massive army of Imperial Army soldiers? This was the ambition hidden deep in Wang Chong's heart. Just that, Wang Chong didn't have such connections. Those people wouldn't listen to him easily either. If he wanted to accomplish his ambitions and plans, he would have to go through Little Uncle. Only Little Uncle was capable of doing so. The instructors on the Pillar of Heaven's mountains are all registered. They have to go through the registration every year. Furthermore, it is strictly forbidden to recruit them from prestigious clans and private individuals. This is a crime punishable by death. However, if your requirements aren't too high, and there's no age restriction, I can help you find a few. According to the rules of the royal court, as long as one has retired for more than 20 years, there's no need for him to report to the Imperial Army Yamen anymore. However, these people are at least in their 50s. Are you sure that it's fine? If it's possible, I can indeed find a few of them. Little Uncle asked with a frown. Ha ha ha, that's even better. Wang Chong clapped his hands and chuckled. In his 50s, he wasn't far from his 60s. At this age, if one didn't break through the bottleneck of martial arts, his fighting strength and stamina would be greatly reduced. However, this was what Wang Chong didn't care about. In his 50s, he was at the age where he had the most experience. He would also have a deeper understanding of martial arts. Wang Chong only cared about the techniques and experience they had mastered. He didn't need them to go to the battlefield to kill the enemy. If he was lucky, he might even be able to find a few powerful instructors. I really don't understand what you're trying to do. However, don't blame me for not reminding you. These people live a comfortable life. The monthly salary given to them by the royal court is nearly 1,000 taels of gold. It's impossible to hire them easily. Little Uncle said. Haha, if it's a matter of money, it'll be even easier. Help me ask them. Just tell them that each of them has 100,000 taels of gold every year. Ask them if they want to come. Wang Chong said. What? Wang Chong's little uncle leaped in shock. His eyeballs nearly popped out of their sockets. To hire a person for 8,000 taels of gold for a month, even he would be tempted, needless to say others. However, thinking about the price Wang Chong could sell a sword for, he felt relieved. The current Wang clan was no longer the Wang clan of the past. Wang Chong, you have to think it through. Is it worth it to spend so much money to hire one? Haha, little uncle. This is called buying a horse's bones with 1,000 taels of gold. It doesn't matter how much money you have. What matters is whether you can hire someone. Wang Chong said. Wang Chong had been working hard to earn money, but Wang Chong had never placed much importance on money. Hiring a few instructors of the Imperial Army for 100,000 taels of gold a year was an unimaginable price in this era. However, no one knew better than Wang Chong that no matter how much money he had, it would become worthless 4 years later when the chaos arrived. Thus, Wang Chong had never been stingy. No matter how much money he earned, it would only be worth it if he spent all of it and converted it into fighting prowess. Everything that Wang Chong was doing now was to prepare for the great chaos that would come in the future. Buying a horse's bones with 1,000 taels of gold. Don't worry, there's no need to buy a horse's bones. At this price, you can choose from all of the retired Imperial Army members. Little uncle shook his head. He looked at Wang Chong with the gaze of a wastrel. Leave this matter to me. I'll inform you when there's news. Wang Chong nodded with a smile. In the main hall, the old master finally calmed down, and he called for everyone to return. After saying a few words, he dismissed the crowd. The old master's 70th birthday had never been a small matter. Everyone knew that after the family met, it would be the old master's subordinates' turn. The old master had students all over the world, and the old master had always been fond of guiding the younger generation. Thus, his students and old acquaintances had already spread across the entire empire. Other than the old master's identity, the reason why the king of Song treated the old master with such respect was also because of his students and old acquaintances. Thus, even though the Yao clan had poached all of the people around the king of Song, as long as the Wang clan and the old master supported the king of Song wouldn't fall so easily. These students and old acquaintances had always been extremely respectful toward the old master. Every year, on the old master's birthday, they would pay a visit. Given how important the old master's 70th birthday was, it was impossible for them to miss it. Hung long long. In just a short moment, the rumbling of carriages could be heard outside the Four Quarters Embassy, and even the ground seemed to be trembling. Luxuriously decorated carriages gathered from all directions as if they had agreed to meet in advance. The Four Quarters Embassy was located in a remote area, but in just a short moment, it was already bustling with activity. Standing on a high vantage point, Wang Chong could clearly see that there were all kinds of people gathered outside the walls. There were white-haired elders, mature middle-aged men, energetic youths, and even children around his age. But no matter who they were, all of them were either rich or noble, and they exuded a deep sense of power and influence. In fact, Wang Chong even saw a few officials of the royal court with purple fish amulets in their hands. Chapter 93. Wang Chong looked at the silhouettes outside the walls and sighed. These people were the greatest resources of the Wang clan, as well as the greatest legacy of his grandfather. Even though the Wang clan was usually poor, even though Wang Chong was a direct descendant of the Wang clan, his monthly allowance couldn't even reach the vast crane pavilion. In fact, he was even toyed with by a hoodlum like Ma Zhou. However, in the Central Plains in the Tang dynasty, there was no one who dared to look down on the Wang clan. The old man was a person of virtue and prestige, and was highly respected in the court. On the other hand, his students and old acquaintances were spread all over the world, and they were involved in all sorts of professions. Some of them were in charge of finances, some of them were involved in the military, some of them were officials of various prefectures, some of them were teachers, some of them were scholars, some of them were officials of the borders, and some of them were generals of the military. Regardless of which profession they were in, these people wielded extraordinary influence. The status of a clan of generals and ministers wasn't just for show. Even when the Yao clan was at its peak, they didn't dare to look down on the Wang clan. Instead, they viewed the Wang clan as a thorn in their side, a thorn in their flesh. To Wang Chong, after his second reincarnation, what he wanted the most was the acknowledgement of his grandfather's old acquaintances and students. Whoever obtained the approval of these people, whoever was able to unite these people would possess an extremely great power. However, it wasn't easy to obtain this power. Even Wang Chong's grandfather was helpless before it. This wasn't a problem of grandfather's approval. In order to obtain this power, one had to obtain the acknowledgement of everyone. It was easy to obtain the acknowledgement of one or two people, but it wasn't an easy task to obtain the acknowledgement of so many people. Thus, Wang Chong's big brother didn't succeed. Wang Chong's second brother didn't succeed. Wang Chong's cousin Wang Li didn't succeed as well. In fact, Wang Chong's big uncle, father, and little uncle had all failed long ago. The succession of a large clan had never been an easy matter. It wasn't just the Wang clan, the Yao clan, and the other clans as well. It was just that the difficulty and methods of succession differed. In the future, when the old master passed away, he might have acknowledged big uncle as his successor. However, it was hard to say how many people truly approved of great uncle. For many people, perhaps out of respect for the old master, they would acknowledge him on the surface. However, it was absolutely impossible for him to truly mobilize this power like the old man did. This was also the greatest problem of the Wang clan's succession. At the same time, it was also a sore point for the old master. Boom! Just as Wang Chong's mind was in turmoil, The doors of the Four Quarters Embassy suddenly opened, and the crowd outside excitedly filed in. There was no crowding. Everyone naturally lined up neatly and walked in the direction of the erudite pavilion in an orderly manner. Their faces were rosy, and they chatted as they walked. Their natural and joyful expressions made it seem as if the 70th birthday celebration was not for Wang Chong's grandfather, but for their own family members. Seeing this, Wang Chong let out a long sigh in his heart. In the entire Wang clan, grandfather was probably the only one who could earn their heartfelt respect. Coming down from the fake mountain, Wang Chong saw these people entering the erudite pavilion to offer their blessings to the old master. Without the old master's permission, the Wang clan wasn't allowed to interact with the old master's students and old friends. This was a taboo. As such, when these people offered their blessings, be it Wang Chong or little uncle, they all avoided them. The entire ceremony lasted for a very long time. Row after row of people entered without bringing any gifts. This was also the old master's rule. After offering their blessings, row after row of people walked out from the main entrance. The entire process was orderly. After an unknown period of time, the entire ceremony finally came to an end. In an instant, the atmosphere in the courtyard suddenly became tense. Wang Chong's big aunt and Mother Zhao Shuhua all became nervous. Everyone looked in the direction of the erudite pavilion in anticipation. Only Wang Chong's little uncle chuckled lightly. With his hands behind his head, he leaned against a fake mountain with a content expression. "Brat, do you think grandfather will call you in?" Unknowingly, cousin Wang Zhuyan suddenly walked around a bamboo forest and appeared behind Wang Chong. Second sister, if Big Aunt finds out that you are here, aren't you afraid that she will pull your ears? Wang Chong chuckled, not replying directly. Brat, are you itching for a beating? Using the bamboo forest as cover, cousin Wang Chong avoided her mother's gaze and raised her fist threateningly. Big Aunt had always disliked cousin Wang Chong being too close to the Wang clan. This was something that Wang Chong had always known. However, this didn't change cousin Wang Chong's personality. At her age, even if Big Aunt wanted to control her, it would be hard for her to do so. Just that, it was inevitable for her to be taught a lesson by Big Aunt every time. I really don't understand why you grandsons would view such things with such importance. My big brother is like this, your big brother is the same, and from the looks of it now, even you brat is the same. Wang Zhuyan stretched out her finger and flicked it lightly, sending a bamboo leaf flying far away. Her eyes were filled with disdain and dissatisfaction. Military affairs and politics had always been unrelated to women. The major affairs in the erudite pavilion had never had anything to do with them, granddaughters and daughters-in-law. Grandfather had never invited her in either. On the other hand, it was the eldest grandsons who were bleeding from the competition. This made her feel both dissatisfied and disdainful. Wang Chong smiled and shook his head, not replying to her words. He was determined to fight for the rights to enter the erudite pavilion, and he was determined to do so with all his might. However, this fight wasn't for personal authority. Wang Chong had his own reasons for fighting for the rights to the pavilion. If he wanted to fulfill his wish and accomplish the mission he shouldered in his life, Wang Chong had to find a way to make use of grandfather's influence and gain their recognition. However, Wang Chong couldn't tell cousin Wang Chong about this. The entire Wang clan was spread out around the erudite pavilion, waiting silently. After an unknown period of time, resounding footsteps sounded. A fully armored Imperial Army commander appeared at the entrance of the erudite pavilion. This Imperial Army commander glanced around and soon, he walked toward the crowd. The gazes of the crowd unconsciously gathered on the commander of the Imperial Army. Even Wang Chong couldn't help but hold his breath. Young Master Li, Duke Zhou has ordered for you to enter the conference hall. Just 8 to 9 zhang away from Wang Chong, the Imperial Army commander's footsteps came to an abrupt halt. He turned to Wang Chong's cousin Wang Li and said, "Lier, what are you waiting for? Your grandfather has called for you." Big Aunt's face lit up in joy as she urged him on. Wang Chong's heart rose high before falling back down. It felt empty. So it wasn't me. For an instant, Wang Chong thought that the Imperial Army commander was here to look for him. Cousin Wang Li soon entered the erudite pavilion. This wasn't his first time entering the erudite pavilion. But every time he entered, Wang Chong could still sense that he was still a little nervous. After the Imperial Army commander entered, he suddenly appeared once more. This time, he headed straight for Wang Chong and stood before Wang Chong. "Chonggongzi, Duke Zhou invites you over." The Imperial Army commander's attitude was extremely polite. In an instant, the air in the Four Quarters embassy froze. Xingshi stared at the 15-year-old Wang Chong in shock, and her complexion immediately turned awful. There had never been a 15-year-old who was summoned into the erudite pavilion before. Wang Chong was only a child, and the old master had completely shattered her understanding. Damn it! The old master is too biased. Xingshi gritted her teeth as she clenched her fists tightly in her sleeves. Wang Chong paid no heed to Xingshi's awful complexion. At this moment there was only joy in his heart, and his heart was finally at ease. It's finally my turn. Wang Chong was overjoyed. Even though everyone in the garden was shocked, Wang Chong wasn't surprised at all. In order to reach this stage and gain the respect of the old master, he had done too many things. Be it saving the clan from danger at the vast crane pavilion, scheming against Yao Guangyi by the borders, the Hyderabad Ores plan, and presenting a sword for the old master's 70th birthday. Wang Chong had done all he could. It wasn't easy for him to reach this stage. Big Ant might think that the old master was biased toward him, but Wang Chong knew that this wasn't any special favor. He had earned it through his own hard work. "Mother, I'll be going in first." Wang Chong walked over and tugged on his mother's hand. Madam Wang stroked Wang Chong's head with a delighted expression. "Second sister, let's go." Wang Chong mischievously gestured to the back of the bamboo forest. Disregarding whether she could see him or not, he walked toward the erudite pavilion. There wasn't anyone in the hall, but voices could be heard from the back of the hall. The old master and his subordinates never discussed matters in the hall, and they didn't allow anyone to view them. Even the Imperial Army guarding the area wasn't allowed to enter. Whether I can win the old master's trust or not depends on this. Wang Chong took in a deep breath, walked around a screen of flowers and birds more than 1 zhang tall, and appeared in the conference hall at the back of the hall. The conference hall was filled with people. As soon as Wang Chong walked in, he saw the old master seated at the very top. Around him, Wang Chong saw many white-haired elders. Every single one of them had a calm demeanor, and they exuded an authoritative aura. Upon seeing Wang Chong enter, these white-haired elders immediately turned to look at him. Even though Wang Chong was mentally prepared, he couldn't help but feel his heart tighten when he saw these white-haired elders in the conference hall. Most of the old master's old friends and students had left for his birthday. Those who were left behind were all old subordinates of the old master, who played an important role under his command. They held extraordinary weight. Of all the people who came to the birthday today, they had the highest prestige, and they also had the greatest influence and rallying power. To gain the recognition of the old master's old friends and students, the opinions of these white-haired elders in the conference hall carried a great deal of weight. Only by conquering them and gaining their recognition would he be able to gain the recognition of the old master's old friends and students. This was a test. Chapter 94. Everyone, this is the son of my third son, Wang Yan. He happens to be my third son as well, and his name is Wang Chong. At this moment the old master spoke. He stretched out his hand and pointed to Wang Chong. "Oh, Chonggongzi. Chonggongzi, come in." The group of white-haired elders greeted Wang Chong, but they didn't seem to be paying much attention to him. It was only out of respect for the old master that they chose to patronize him. They had seen too many people in this hall. The old master's eldest grandson Wang Li, his third son Wang Yan's eldest son Wang Fu, and his second son Wang Bei. This was the fourth, so they didn't mind a mere Wang Chong. Junior Wang Chong pays respect to the elders. Wang Chong bowed respectfully, paying no heed to the attitude of the elders. Those who were able to accompany the old master here were his old subordinates. Most of these people had experienced the treacherous palace coup d'état, and they had also followed the old master when the empire was on the verge of collapse and the divine continent had fallen into chaos. They had supported the current Saint Emperor, and when they were young, they had also entered the imperial court and held extremely high positions. Although they were over 60 now, they still possessed extraordinary rallying power and influence. None of them were the clan heads of prestigious clans or influential figures. Even though they were in their 60s, they still wielded extraordinary influence. Given their influence, there was indeed no need for them to treat a 15-year-old child with too much respect. In fact, if not for the old master's influence, they probably wouldn't even bother to patronize Wang Chong. "Take a seat. Move a seat for him," the old man said from above. Those in the conference hall were all veterans. Even though Wang Chong was the grandson of the old master, in terms of seniority, he could only sit at the very back. Furthermore, it was only a small chair, and it was almost all the way to the corner. In truth, the old master had arranged for Wang Chong to listen in. It would be beneficial for him in the future as well. After settling Wang Chong, the group of people in the meeting hall started chatting again. Wang Chong sat in a corner and looked around. In the main hall, other than the old master and his old subordinates, Big Uncle Wang Zhen was also present. He was seated beside the old master. Eldest uncle was the eldest son, and at the same time, he was also an important minister of the imperial court. Whether or not he could gain the recognition of these old ministers, he would always have a seat next to the old man. Other than Big Uncle, cousin Wang Li was present as well. When he first arrived at the Four Quarters Embassy, his cousin was filled with frustration and impatience. However, at this moment he was a completely different person. When the old master was chatting with his old subordinates, he was listening attentively, and a strong desire to perform could be seen on his face. This was completely different from the impression he gave Wang Chong before. Cousin has also won the approval of grandfather's old subordinates. A thought flashed through Wang Chong's mind. His grandfather didn't have the final say on whether he could gain the approval of these old subordinates. He only had the right to recommend. Respect and approval were things that couldn't be forced. Only when it came from the bottom of one's heart would it be effective. Even though his cousin had always tried his best to perform, Wang Chong knew that no matter how hard he tried, it would be impossible for him to win over the old master's old subordinates. It wasn't that he wasn't outstanding enough, but that these old subordinates of his were extremely experienced and had been through great storms in their lives. No matter what kind of talent he had, in their eyes it was just an insignificant skill and seemed insignificant. Conquering them was not an easy task to accomplish in the first place. Otherwise big uncle, father, uncle and little uncle, big brother, second brother and cousin would all fail. A group of people could only win the approval of one or two old subordinates at the very most. Up till now, no one had been able to win the approval of all of them at the same time. Sweeping his gaze across the meeting hall, Wang Chong's gaze finally fell on the old master. A hint of sorrow flashed across his eyes. The old master won't be able to survive until the great turmoil. This thought flashed across Wang Chong's mind. No one knew better than him that 4 years later, grandfather would pass away. The internal injuries from his early years, coupled with the heavy injuries he suffered on the battlefield, coupled with the many years of hard work, even after his retirement when he was over 60 years old, he was still working hard for the emperor, offering advice and suggestions. This caused his grandfather to be constantly in a state of intense mental fatigue. In a few years' time the old master would pass away. But at this moment not a single person in the Wang clan, be it big uncle or father, had realized this. Grandfather's strength masked his weakness, such that in the eyes of the Wang clan, grandfather was like a god. He was immortal and would never fall. But in this world there was no one who could live forever, not even grandfather. That was why the entire Wang clan was in such a state of panic after grandfather's collapse. Even big uncle, who had always been calm and composed, was at a complete loss as to what to do. Wang Chong would always remember the look of panic on his face that day. Wang Chong knew that the Wang clan didn't have many chances to inherit grandfather's influence. In 4 years he had only done it 4 times. As the saying goes, time is short. Without a core figure who could unite the hearts of the people, the old master's students and old acquaintances would all scatter in the future. The influence and standing that the old master had built up throughout his life would disappear in an instant. In the future, even if there were some people who remained loyal to the Wang clan, their influence wouldn't be as great as before. The inheritance of a prestigious clan had never been a simple matter, and this had always been grandfather's sore point. No matter what, I must find a way to win the recognition of grandfather's old subordinates. Sitting by the corner, Wang Chong clenched his fists tightly. In the room, other than the Wang clan and grandfather's old subordinates, there was also a group of juniors. Every year, during grandfather's birthday, it was the time for grandfather to recommend candidates, but at the same time, it was also the time for the old subordinates to recommend juniors to grandfather to inherit his influence. Rash in the conference hall, a group of people chatted, and unknowingly, their conversation drifted to the current political situation. The Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganate in the northern grasslands are growing stronger and stronger, and there are signs of them converging. I heard that the khans of the two tribes have already sent their khans to discuss this matter. We have to take precautions. A white-haired old man with a sturdy figure and a strong murderous aura exuding from his body said. Wang Chong recognized him. He was known as Duke of Yi, and he was grandfather's old subordinate. He had participated in the palace coup together with grandfather and supported the Holy Emperor to ascend to the throne. Duke of Yi's surname was Yi, but no one knew his full name, and no one dared to ask about it. Wang Chong only knew that he was grandfather's most loyal subordinate, and he possessed great strategic foresight. While everyone was still caught up in the internal strife, grandfather's old subordinates had already set their sights on the northern grasslands. In the past few years, the world has been peaceful. According to the decree of the Holy Emperor, we have been doing business with everyone in the world. The Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganate in the north aren't skilled in smithing, but thanks to our trade, they have bought a lot of refined iron and black iron from our Tang dynasty. Now their arrowheads are even starting to use inscribed iron. The Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganate are skilled in riding and archery. If they were to obtain our refined iron and black iron, their fighting prowess would surely soar. This isn't a blessing for the empire. Duke of Ye's hair and beard were all white, but his eyes were bright, and he didn't seem old at all. When he spoke of the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganate in the north, his face was filled with worry. That's not all. I've seen the official document from the Bureau of Military Personnel. The scattered cavalry of the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganate are raiding the borders more and more frequently. In the past we could still trade 2 for 3, and 2 of our men would die. If 3 groups of Turkic cavalry were to come, we would be able to wipe them all out at the cost of 2 casualties. But now we can only trade 2 for 2. Sometimes, in the case of a surprise attack, we might even suffer more losses. Duke Joe, this situation is really worrisome. Their fighting prowess is increasing rapidly. A muscular white-haired old man said. Of all of them, he was the tallest. Even though they were seated together, he was at least a head taller than the others. Furthermore, his thick arms and legs made him seem more like a muscular man than an old man. Wang Chong remembered that he was one of grandfather's subordinates, and he was known as Big Beard. When he was young, he had a full beard that he never shaved, and he even took pride in. Even when he was old, he still looked the same, just that his beard had turned white. Also, no one dared to call him Big Beard anymore. Everyone addressed him as Elder Hu. In the past, he was the #1 general under grandfather's command. Duke Joe, you're the closest to His Majesty. You should speak to His Majesty about this matter. The borders of the empire haven't been peaceful for the past few years. Another white-haired old subordinate echoed, his heart filled with worry. Wang Chong recognized him. This person's surname was Chiao, and he was even older than grandfather. Thus, he addressed him as Old Master Chiao. For the 3 of them to talk about the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates at the same time, it was clear that they had discussed this matter beforehand, and they made use of Duke Joe's birthday to bring it up. The Anbei Protectorate Manor is the northern border, and it's their responsibility to protect the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates. Did the Anbei Protectorate Manor say anything about this? Hearing the 3 old subordinates mention the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates at the same time, wariness immediately flashed across the old master's eyes. From Qin to Han, from Sui to Tang, the nomadic tribes of the north had always been a huge threat to the Central Plains. During the Qin dynasty, the Central Plains was forced to construct the Great Wall, and 100,000 elite soldiers were stationed there. The Han dynasty faced the White Ascension disaster, and the Sui dynasty suffered from many invasions. By the time the Tang dynasty arrived, the Central Plains had always been wary of the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates. Back then, the old master had once led an army to the north and defeated the allied armies of the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates. However, the Tang dynasty had also suffered heavy losses in that battle. Chapter 95. Most of the people in the room were retired, but in terms of intelligence network, there weren't many who could surpass the people in this room. As soon as the old master finished his words, someone immediately spoke up. The Northern Protectorate Manor is under a lot of pressure, and they have submitted petitions to the royal court in hopes that the royal court can ban the salt and iron trade, especially the refined iron trade. However, His Majesty has always been open to the Tang dynasty, so it isn't appropriate for the trade to be restricted. Thus, the petitions were kept in the royal court. Other than that, the Northern Protectorate Manor has also been negotiating with the Tang dynasty. However, the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganate have been saying that those are unruly mercenaries, and they have been cracking down on them as well. As such, there's nothing they can do about it. In the meeting hall, another white-haired old man with fluttering white hair said. This was Elder Ma, the commander of the cavalry under the old master. Unlike the others, his calligraphy was deep and forceful, yet it didn't lack elegance. He was known as the calligrapher on horseback. Of the old master's subordinates, his calligraphy was the best. Eldest Gongzi, you are an important official of the royal court, and you have the authority to discuss matters. Can you raise this matter up in the royal court? As Elder Ma spoke, he turned to look at Wang Chong's big uncle. General Wang Zhen was already 45, and his child was already grown up. But in the eyes of the old master's subordinates, he was still the eldest Gongzi. It's useless. We also need the horses of the Turkic Khaganate. If we ban the salt and iron trade, we won't be able to get any horses. His Majesty will never agree to this. Big Uncle Wang Zhen said. The war horses trained by the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganate possessed the strength of tigers and wolves, and this was something that no other power could match up to. It wasn't easy to ban the trade. Hearing Wang Zhen's words, the old subordinates frowned. However, the royal court has already sent men to disintegrate the alliance between the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganate. These two Turkic Khaganates have been fighting internally, so it's unlikely that they will be able to work together anytime soon. Wang Zhen hurriedly added, Grandfather, I do have an idea. Wang Chong's cousin, Wang Li, had been listening at the side. At this moment, he suddenly stood up, his face revealing a strong desire to perform. In an instant, everyone's eyes were focused on Wang Qi, even Wang Chong was no exception. We can unite the Northern Protectorate Manor and the Chanyu Protectorate Manor, and use the strength of the two protector generals to teach them a harsh lesson. As long as it was like the previous dynasty, let them have a taste of their power, then they will restrain themselves. It can also suppress the arrogance of the Eastern and Western Turks. Clenching his fists tightly, Wang Li said. Upon seeing this, Wang Chong frowned and could not help but shake his head in his heart. All of the men of the Wang clan hoped to be like grandfather and his old subordinates, achieving great feats by the border. My cousin is no exception. However, his cousin's military prowess was obviously not as good as he was in other areas. Cousin's thinking is too simple. How could it be that easy to mobilize such a large number of troops? Any operation that involved two protectorates would need to be discussed by the imperial court, analyzed on a sand table, and verified by many experts. With such a huge movement, the Eastern and Western Turks would have long known about it. Regardless of whether it is to prepare in advance or to flee 1,000 li to avoid the two protectorates, there is more than enough time. Furthermore, before the troops are mobilized, the rations have to be moved first. With so many troops, the amount of rations required isn't a small matter. In theory, this is feasible, but in reality, it isn't feasible at all. Wang Chong thought. It had been more than a year or two since cousin joined the military, but it was clear that he wasn't familiar with the various aspects of the military and the procedures required. Wang Chong knew that cousin's talent in politics was far greater than his ability in military affairs. However, it was a pity that big uncle wanted him to surpass his big brother and send him into the military, resulting in such a situation. As expected, upon hearing cousin's words, the old subordinates in the conference hall frowned. Even the old master, who was seated at the top of the conference hall, frowned. Young Master Li is young and talented. You do have your own ideas. Perhaps this matter might really work. The Eastern and Western Turks are too arrogant. Young Master Li is right, they should be suppressed and taught a lesson. The group of white-haired elders nodded in agreement. Even though they were saying words of agreement, it was clear that they were just trying to brush Wang Chong off. Initially, Wang Qi was still filled with anticipation, thinking that everyone would at least agree to it. But while they did agree to it, there was something amiss about it. He wasn't a fool, and he immediately sensed that there was something amiss here. His complexion immediately turned awful. Sit down. Big Uncle Wang Zhen finally couldn't help but speak up. The Chanyu Protectorate Manors Protector General Li Dan, and the Anbei Protectorate Manors Protector General Zhang Zhiyun, have always been at odds with one another. Not too long ago, the two of them even submitted a report to one another, and their relationship is extremely strained. How can it be possible for them to work together to deal with the Eastern and Western Turks? Wang Qi's face immediately paled. Even though he didn't hold a high position in the military, he knew that it was a huge taboo for the commanders to be at odds with one another. Out of respect for the old master, the subordinates of the old master didn't expose him so as not to embarrass him. He had been thinking of putting on a good show before the old master, hoping to win the acknowledgement of the old master's subordinates. He didn't expect that he would end up making a fool of himself before the crowd, pulling down their impression of him. In an instant, his face flushed red, and he sat down forcefully. Biting his lips, he didn't say a single word. Sigh. Upon seeing this sight, Wang Chong couldn't help but sigh. Cousin Wang Chong had always been a competitive person. Even though he was a little difficult to get along with, he wasn't a bad person. In his previous life, he had also suffered such a setback, causing him to fall into dejection. In the end, his relationship with his uncle and aunt fell apart, and in the end, he charged out of the clan, disappearing without a trace. Chong, or what do you think? Just as Wang Chong was contemplating how he could help his cousin, the old master suddenly spoke up. However, this time he wasn't asking his old subordinates, Big Uncle Wang Zhen, or Cousin Wang Li. Instead, he was asking the youngest Wang Chong. The moment the old master spoke, all of the old subordinates in the conference hall were stunned. They turned to look at Wang Chong, as if this was the first time they had noticed him. How could this be? All along, they thought that the old master was pushing for Li Gongzi to take over his position. But from the looks of it now, they were wrong. The one Duke Zhou was pushing for was the teenage child sitting in the corner. To think that they thought that Duke Zhou was only pulling him over to listen in on the discussion to gain some experience. Grandfather. Wang Chong was taken aback. He felt as if he was lacking in historical data. That's right. He did want to put on a good show to attract everyone's attention. However, one had to consider the occasion and method of doing so. If he were to suddenly interrupt, it would only make his grandfather's esteemed old subordinates feel that he was being too rash. At that time, he would be thinking too highly of himself, but going too far was as bad as falling short. Thus, Wang Chong sat in the corner obediently, listening attentively without saying anything. Just that, Wang Chong didn't expect that a mishap would come so quickly. His grandfather would actually use an important matter as important as the Turks to seek the opinion of a child like him. Wang Chong hadn't expected this to happen, so he was caught off guard by the sudden question. Speak your mind, there's no need to be afraid. The old master said with a smile as he raised his palm to encourage Wang Chong. The conference hall abruptly fell silent. Wang Chong's big uncle glanced at him deeply, but he didn't say a word. No one knows a son better than the father, and no one knows a father better than the son. He didn't expect the old master to test Wang Chong so quickly. The sight before him seemed abrupt, but in truth, it was an intentional move by the old master. In truth, this was an intentional move by the old master. He didn't want Wang Chong to be prepared so as to test his true capabilities. To think that the old master would think so highly of him. Wang Zhen thought as he recalled the scene where Wang Chong presented his sword to the old master. To think that Wang Chong's presentation of his sword actually made the old master feel as though he was a soulmate. Thinking about it, there was probably a huge relationship between the two. Bastard! Wang Li didn't know what the old master was thinking, nor did he know what his father was thinking. But upon seeing the old master actually allowing Wang Chong to speak on such an important occasion, he clenched his fists tightly and gritted his teeth so hard that they nearly shattered. Turning his head to look at Wang Chong, a deep hostility suddenly flashed across Wang Li's eyes. Indeed, young Master Chong, feel free to speak your mind. No one will blame you for it. There's no need to be afraid. The old master's subordinates also encouraged him. In their eyes, Wang Chong's silence was a sign of fear. Out of respect for the old master, no one dared to make things difficult for him. But of course, no one paid him any heed either. It was impossible to expect a 15-year-old child to talk about something as important as the military and national affairs. In their view, the old master's actions were probably to train him. SSS. Wang Chong took in a deep breath, and under everyone's gaze, he finally stood up from his seat. His mind was in turmoil, but a moment later he slowly calmed down. The opportunity he had been waiting for had finally arrived. Slowly, immense confidence rose in Wang Chong. Grandfather and elders, I believe that the problem in the north doesn't lie in the eastern and western Turkic Khaganate but the royal court. It doesn't lie in the weapons, but in the hearts of the people. In fact, it might not even lie by the borders but within the region. Facing everyone's gazes, Wang Chong's voice was powerful, leaving everyone in the conference hall dumbfounded. Even the old master, who had invited Wang Chong to express his opinion, was taken aback. Young Master Chong, what do you mean by it doesn't lie in the eastern and western Turkic Khaganate but within the royal court? What do you mean by it doesn't lie in the weapons, but in the hearts of the people, not by the borders but within the region? I beseech young Master Chong to elaborate on it. Elder Yi, who was brimming with killing intent, suddenly spoke up with a deep frown on his forehead. Of the old master's subordinates, he was the most proficient in the field of strategy. His opinion was more than enough to represent the opinions of the other elders. Chapter 96. Grandfather and elders, you have said it yourself. In the past, when the eastern and western Turkic Khaganate invaded the borders, we were able to trade 2 for 3, perhaps even more. But now we are trading 2 for 2 and we have suffered even more casualties. Did grandfather and elders really think that it was just because of the metal weapons? Could it be that by restricting the metal weapons, this situation will be changed, and the eastern and western Turkic Khaganate will weaken? Wang Chong organized his thoughts and faced the gazes of the elders in the conference hall. His words left everyone dumbfounded. Everyone had only been thinking about the metal weapons, and they had never thought about anything more profound. Just as Wang Chong said, the rise of the eastern and western Turkic Khaganate was already an established fact, and it wasn't something that could be changed with just a few metal weapons. Chonger, what are you trying to say? Even Wang Chong's big uncle had a grim expression on his face. As an influential official of the royal court, he had the authority to discuss politics, so he was extremely sensitive to such matters. Every 100 years, the nomads of the steppe will experience a great rise. This is the trend of the times, and no one can change it. This was the case for the Qin, the Great Han, and the Sui. It's the same for the Tang dynasty now. It's no longer a problem for the eastern and western Turkic Khaganate in the north. It's the same for the Uzun Plateau in the west, Goguryeo in the east, and Irai in the south. We can't change the fate of these nomads and barbaric tribes. The only thing we can do is to change ourselves. That's why grandson said that this matter isn't at the borders, but the Tang dynasty itself, not the eastern and western Turkic Khaganate. Wang Chong said grimly. Even though he had reincarnated, Wang Chong couldn't help but worry when he thought about the dire situation that the Tang dynasty was facing. After his rebirth, only he himself knew how many days and nights he had been unable to sleep. The people in this meeting hall were all important ministers. Although many of them had already retired, their lifetime of influence was still there. Their families still had a huge influence in the court and the common people. As the saying goes, a dam of 1,000 miles can collapse because of an ant's nest. The current Tang dynasty was already in grave danger. All it needed was a trigger, and it would all explode at once. The fact that the people in the conference hall were able to notice the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates in the north was already a testament to their foresight. However, Wang Chong knew that this was not enough. This was not the fundamental problem at all. Wang Chong had to think of a way to warn them, and through this meeting hall he could influence even more people. However, the Central Plains has been peaceful for many years. During the reign of Emperor Taizong, he forced the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganate to the north of the Ain Mountains, forcing many barbarians to submit to him. He then conquered Annan. During the reign of the late emperor, he established the Northern Protectorate Manor, Chanyu Protectorate Manor, and Annan Protectorate Manor, further expanding his influence. In the early years of the current dynasty, he expanded his influence to the western regions and established the Western Protectorate Manor. After so many years of victories, our dynasty's influence has grown to its peak. Not only did it surpass the Sui dynasty, it even surpassed the Han and Qin dynasties, reaching an unprecedented level of power in the Central Plains. Yet, didn't grandfather and the other elders realize it? It is precisely because of this that the entire court is starting to feel complacent. Recalling the current situation of the Tang dynasty, Wang Chong's heart felt heavy. Regardless of whether it was the strongest Xiongnu or the strongest Turkic Khaganate, they eventually succumbed to the hooves of the dynasty of the Central Plains. However, the true problem was that the people's hearts were scattered. I have heard of a poem in the past. The youths of the Ing continent hate the wilderness, they hunt beneath the city walls covered in fox fur. 1,000 cups of wine won't intoxicate them, who can ride a horse at the age of 10. While we are pursuing the fox fur and clothing, indulging in luxurious pleasures, taking pride in not getting drunk, the Turkic Khaganate in the north are already training their children to ride horses and shoot arrows, taking pride in killing their enemies on the battlefield. The Turkic Khaganate is easy to conquer, but the hearts of the people are hard to tame. I believe that this is the true problem. At the end of his speech, Wang Chong's heart felt incomparably heavy. This wasn't Wang Chong trying to convince the elders or show off in front of them. Rather, it was Wang Chong's personal experience in his previous life. Later on, when his life was full of hardships and he was wandering alone, he accidentally heard that poem. Many things could only be seen clearly when the wood had already turned into a boat, and there was no turning back. But by that time it would already be nighttime. The current Tang dynasty was living a life of luxury, and the hearts of the people had changed. It was no longer the original Tang dynasty. It was a pity that many people who were caught up in the situation didn't realize this. The conference hall was silent, and the atmosphere was heavy. Initially, the elders were only interested in listening to Wang Chong's opinion and see how Duke Zhou's grandson would amaze the world with a single feat. However, the more they listened, the heavier their hearts became. When they heard Wang Chong reciting that poem by the borders, they were even more shocked. As if this was the first time they had noticed Duke Zhou's grandson. Even Grandpa Shang, who was sitting in the main hall, was shocked. He invited Wang Chong in and suddenly asked. He wanted to use this method to test this grandson of his. He wanted to see how capable he was, how talented he was, and what kind of position he should be bestowed upon him in the future. As for the matter of the successor, from Wang Chong's big uncle Wang Zhen to Wang Chong's father Wang Yan, to Wang Chong's big brother Wang Fu and cousin Wang Li, he had been disappointed far too many times. Conquering a group of old brothers, old subordinates, and gaining their recognition was not an easy task to accomplish in the first place. After so many years he had already given up hope. Yet, the old master didn't expect that Wang Chong's performance would far surpass his expectations. This was no longer a question of whether he was satisfied or not. What this grandson of his had displayed had far exceeded the content of the test. For the first time he suddenly saw a glimmer of hope. The reactions of the crowd fell into Wang Li's eyes, and his complexion turned even more awful. Chonggongzi, I would like to ask you a question. Did you compose that poem yourself? Or is it true? In the conference hall, Elder Yi suddenly asked. There seemed to be a deeper meaning behind his stern voice. If Wang Chong was the one who composed that poem, then it could only mean that Duke Zhou's grandson was talented. This could only mean that Duke Zhou's grandson was very talented. To be able to write such a poem in the context of the Great Tang's current prosperity and the unique characteristics of the Turkic nomadic tribes, there was no doubt about his talent. Given his 15-year-old age, it was indeed an astonishing feat. It was reminiscent of Duke Zhou when he was young. However, if such a poem really came from the borders, then the nature of the matter would be different. The situation would be much more serious. This was no longer a problem of Duke Zhou recommending his grandson. This was a matter of national importance. There is indeed such a matter, Wang Chong said grimly. He had heard of this poem in his previous life, but it wasn't something that only appeared when he was listening to it. Rather, it had existed among the commoners for a very long time. Even if the elders here were to send someone to investigate it, they would still be able to find it. The moment Wang Chong said those words, the atmosphere in the conference hall turned solemn. The subordinates of the old master glanced at one another with grim expressions. They weren't worried that Wang Chong was lying. After all, such matters could be easily found out. Instead, the elders were considering other matters. Duke Zhou, even though we have been obsessed with the matter regarding the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganate for several decades, our foresight and knowledge are truly beneath that of young Master Chong. But in terms of insight and knowledge, we are truly inferior to young Master Chong. Just like what young Master Chong said, the matter regarding the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganate doesn't lie in the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganate, but in the royal court, not in the weapons but in the hearts of the people. Duke Zhou should have told His Majesty that His Majesty has come to pay his respects. Duke Ye's beard trembled as he said with a heavy heart. Wang Chong was only a 15-year-old child while the elders were all in their 50s. They were all experienced and knowledgeable. But it was precisely because of this that the elders knew that Wang Chong wasn't lying. The Turkic Khaganate might be easy to resolve, but the hearts of the people were no longer the same. This was the true problem. This was something that even old officials like them could do nothing about. This was the reason why Duke Ye's heart was filled with worry. After muddling through life for so many years, no one could have imagined that they would hear such insightful insight from a mere teenage grandson of Duke Zhou. Let's wait for His Majesty to arrive. I'll discuss it with him. At the head of the conference hall, the old master nodded his head with a heavy heart. He didn't expect that a conversation between brothers and a test for his grandson would end up in such a manner. But compared to this, what he was truly worried about was the grim situation the empire was facing. Congratulations, Duke Zhou. The Wang clan has produced a Qilin's son. To possess such insightful views on military affairs at such a young age, he will surely become a pillar of the empire in the future. His future is limitless. Young Master Chong resembles Duke Zhou from back then. In time, our Tang dynasty will surely produce another important official. Congratulations, Duke Zhou. Congratulations, young Master Chong. The elders in the hall congratulated each other. Their actions were different from how they treated the grandson of the Wang clan, Wang Li. This time the elders were sincere. They looked at Wang Chong, who was seated by the corner, with admiration in their eyes. Come, young Master Chong, sit beside me. Duke Yi, who exuded a killing aura and had a sharp eye for strategy, suddenly beckoned to Wang Chong. The more he looked at this child, the more he liked him. He had met quite a few of Duke Zhou's direct descendants, but this child was the only one who left him in a different light. In fact, he even cherished his talent. If he were to be groomed well, this child's future would be limitless. This wasn't just empty words but his intuition. He Yidong had a sharp eye for people, and he had never made a mistake in those whom he had set his eyes on. This person couldn't be wrong either. Wang Chong was taken aback. He subconsciously turned to look at his grandfather, who was seated at the head of the hall. Go on. Since Yidong likes you, you should sit beside him. The old man waved his hand and smiled as he sat on the top seat. He had lived an upright and incorruptible life, and he rarely smiled. But today he was truly delighted. Yes, grandfather. Upon receiving his grandfather's approval, Wang Chong nodded his head and moved his seat to Duke Ye's side. Chapter 97. Grandpa Elders. There's actually one more thing. Beside Elder Yi, Wang Chong did not immediately sit down. Oh. The elders looked on in surprise. Young Master Chong, just say what you want to say, Duke said. He had a very good impression of Duke Jiu, his youngest grandson. Regarding the matter of salt and iron, although the imperial court has not set up a project and all the memorials have not been issued, the imperial court has not yet approved it. But if we want to deal with the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates and reduce the number of weapons they obtain, there are other methods, and the imperial court will definitely swiftly approve these methods. Wang Chong composed himself and said. Wang Chong's cousin Wang Li already had an ugly expression on his face. All the limelight had been stolen by Wang Chong. Now that he heard him mention the ironware he had just mentioned, his face was so dark that it was about to drip water. Wasn't this embarrassing him in front of his face? Young Master Chong, what method are you talking about? The group of people asked curiously. The meaning of the Holy Emperor was very clear. Trade was absolutely impossible to prohibit. It was impossible to close the trade links between the Tang dynasty and all countries just to ban ironware. This was the reason why all the memorials had been left unpublished. Wang Chong actually said that he had a way to get the imperial court to pass his decision. This made the elders curious. Chonger, don't speak nonsense. Everyone here is an elder. You don't understand what's going on in the imperial court, so don't talk nonsense. Wang Chong's uncle reminded him with a straight face. Wang Zhen's feelings toward Wang Chong were complicated. On one hand, the more outstanding Wang Chong's performance was, the smaller the chance of Li inheriting his father's position and influence as the successor of the family. But on the other hand, with so many of his father's old subordinates around, Wang Chong didn't just represent himself, but the entire Wang clan. Wang Qi no longer had any hope, Wang Fu wasn't outstanding enough, and Wang Bei was ruined. If even Wang Chong failed, his father's old subordinates and his students would look down on the entire Wang clan. As the saying goes, like father, like son. 100 beasts would submit to a fierce tiger, but they would never submit to a dog's son. Wang Chong's previous performance was already pretty good. Even as his uncle, he couldn't say anything about it. What Wang Zhen was afraid of was that he would slip up by speaking too much. If that happened, all of his previous efforts would go to waste, and all of his previous efforts would go to waste. Eldest young master, it's a good thing that young Master Chong has such thoughts. Let him speak. Old Ma also spoke up. Those present were all intelligent people, so how could Wang Zhen's thoughts be hidden from them? Wang Chong was only 15 years old, and he was not yet in touch with the affairs of the imperial court. Moreover, Wang Yan was a border general, so it was even more impossible for him to teach him. Because of this, the elders wanted to know how strong this 15-year-old kid was. Chonger, it's fine. Go ahead, even if you're wrong, no one will blame you. Old Master Shen waved his hand and said in the hall. He treated all of his children and grandchildren equally. How capable one was, how high one's position would be. It was rare for his old subordinates and brothers to be here today. Since Wang Chong had already started the discussion, the rest was not up to him. This test would determine his future accomplishments, and he could already count on how much help he could receive from his old subordinates. And how capable Wang Chong was would be the crux of it all. Yes, grandfather. Wang Chong bowed deeply before continuing. Actually, it's very simple to suppress the output of metal weapons. All we have to do is raise the price of metal weapons. It's useless. Metal weapons are involved in all aspects of life. Small ones include pots, shovels, hoes, and so on. Large ones include weapons, armor, weapons. Raising the price of metal weapons will increase the burden on the lives of the commoners, and it will increase the expenditure of the imperial court on the military. On top of that, those clans that produce metal weapons, local clans, small workshops, mines, generals, and so on, all of these will cause a huge backlash. This kind of thing is absolutely impossible. At the end of the hall, a skinny white-haired old man spoke up. Wang Chong recognized him as Elder Zhao. Of grandfather's old subordinates, he was the weakest in martial arts. The reason was simple, he was the logistics officer. When grandfather was young, he was sent to the borders of the Great Wall. and he insisted on him serving as the logistics officer. He had to deal with the royal court and the local authorities. Everyone knew that logisticians had the most complicated tasks. But as long as Elder Zhao was around, all the trivial matters, bits and pieces, Elder Zhao would be able to handle them in an orderly manner. As soon as he heard Wang Chong's suggestion, he immediately knew that it was impossible. In order to contain the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganate, he would lose sight of the bigger picture for the sake of small gains, neglecting the essentials and throwing himself into disarray. Everyone in the conference hall thought that Wang Chong would have some wise suggestion. But upon hearing those words, they were disappointed. After all, he was still young. He was only 15, so how could he possibly understand the affairs of the royal court? If raising the price could curb the production of metal weapons, they would have long resolved the matter. There would be no need for them to discuss it here. Of course it won't work if it's just raising the price. Wang Chong smiled confidently. Sweeping his gaze across the room, he didn't seem discouraged at all. But what if we use tariffs? Tariffs? Surprised, Elder Zhao frowned for the first time. The other elders also had curious looks on their faces. They glanced at one another before turning to look at Wang Chong with interest. They had never heard of such a thing before. May I ask young Master Chong what tariffs are? I have spent half of my life dealing with finance, taxation, logistics. There is no tax that I don't know about in the Tang dynasty, but pardon me for my ignorance, but what exactly are tariffs? Elder Zhao said sternly, putting on a posture of humbly seeking guidance. This was also one of his strengths. Whenever he encountered something he didn't understand, he would ask without hesitation. Even in his old age, he was still the same. This was also the reason why the old master trusted him for half of his life and admired him so much. Seeing the gazes of the elders, Wang Chong couldn't help but chuckle. In his previous life, he had pondered over the matter regarding the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganate for a very long time. Actually, tariffs could solve the problem. Even though in another world, tariffs were something that everyone knew of. But in this world, no one knew what tariffs were. The Tang dynasty had a household tax, a headcount tax, a market tax, a merchant tax. But the only thing it didn't have was tariffs. Most of the Abbasid Caliphate, Karaksbazinu, Turks, and Gogurians who came to the mainland to purchase goods enjoyed the same price as those in the Central Plains. Thus, even if the royal court cut off trade with the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganate, these nomadic Khaganate could still obtain an endless supply of metal weapons from the Abbasid Caliphate, Karaksbazinu, and the Tang dynasty. And for a country that traded with 10,000 countries, this was extremely abnormal. The Tang dynasty had been doing business internally for a long time, and many people had not realized that there was such a thing as tariffs. Since they didn't realize it, Wang Chong felt that he had to remind them and make them aware of the existence of this thing. Grandfather and all the seniors. Salt and iron were special industries, especially ironware. In my grandson's opinion, there's no need to pay taxes when doing business on the mainland. This way, everyone can enjoy the preferential price, and it won't cause chaos. However, if someone were to bring these weapons out of the Tang dynasty and into Karaksbazinu Abbasid Caliphate, or the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates in the north, they could set up checkpoints at the borders to collect taxes. This is called a tariff. Because these ironwares are no longer in circulation within the Tang dynasty, of course, the price can't be the same as inside. The tax rate can be doubled, tripled up to 5 times the price. This way, it won't affect the internal price of salt and iron. Secondly, it can also bring a huge amount of additional revenue to the Tang dynasty. Because ironwares are sold in large quantities in large countries and political factors, they tend to be sold in large quantities. Thus, if we were to impose a tariff on ironwares, there would only be 2 situations. First, the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates would buy them in large quantities due to their overall strength, regardless of the price. This way, even though we wouldn't be able to stop them, we would at least be able to get a huge sum of money to subsidize the empire. Second, the price would be too high. The Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates would give up on buying them. That's even better. This way, even though we would lose a huge sum of money, we would be able to completely suppress the importation of ironwares into the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganates, indirectly suppressing their fighting prowess. Isn't this our goal? Furthermore, the tariff is only limited to the salt and iron industries. The other industries wouldn't be affected. Thus, the Holy Emperor doesn't have to worry about the trade between the East and the West being affected. Of course, the tariff isn't limited to just salt and iron. Other goods can be taxed as long as the tax rate is appropriate. Of course, these are matters that the royal court needs to discuss. This isn't something that can be resolved by just a few words of mine. At the end of his words, Wang Chong glanced at his big uncle. Everyone in the conference hall had been listening intently to Wang Chong's words. At the start, they were still disapproving of Wang Chong's words, but the more they heard, the brighter their eyes lit up. Eventually, even Elder Zhao, who had vetoed Wang Chong's words, looked at Wang Chong in astonishment. If he hadn't heard it with his own ears, he would have never believed that a 15-year-old child would be able to spout such words. Tariffs, tariffs. These old fellows were only concerned about the threat of the eastern and western Turkic Khaganates to the north, and as more and more ironwares appeared, the country grew stronger and stronger. Thus, the most direct solution was to ban all ironwares and close off the trade with the eastern and western Turkic Khaganates. Or perhaps they could just take Duke Zhou's eldest grandson, young Master Li, and wage a war against the eastern and western Turkic Khaganates to intimidate them. However, no one had ever thought that they could use something as tariffs to subjugate the eastern and western Turkic Khaganates without any bloodshed, thus banning their ironwares. Moreover, as an elder of the Tang Empire's politics and logistics, he was almost certain that His Majesty would definitely agree. In fact, even without much consideration, the people in the royal court would swiftly pass the resolution. This was especially so for the finance ministers. They would surely push for this matter with all their might. Ha ha ha, Shuezik and those finance ministers can find a few ropes and commit suicide out of shame. To think that they would think of all kinds of excuses to collect taxes from the commoners and suck their hard-earned money. But how could they not have thought of something as good as tariffs? Didn't the merchants of Karak Spazinu and Abbasid Caliphate claim that they were rich? Despite having so many targets for taxation, they still didn't think of it. Chapter 98. Exactly, this is a serious dereliction of duty. This kind of thing doesn't even need us old fellows to say it. As long as we send a message to them, they will feel ashamed. We don't even need to say it. Duke of Hu chimed in with a smile. Wang Chong knew of Shuezik. This was the finance minister of the imperial court. Although people called him a vampire and scolded him for racking his brains every day to collect food from the people and collect taxes to fill the national treasury, Wang Chong knew that this person was not a bad person, nor did he have any selfish motives. The taxes he collected were basically all added to the national treasury. But he had not committed any corruption. Ha ha ha, Duke Zhou, young Master Chong is quick-witted. If not for the current prosperity of martial arts, he would only be wasting his talent. Otherwise, I would have brought him along with me. Elder Zhao looked at Wang Chong with a strange look in his eyes. This youngest grandson of Duke Zhou's was truly remarkable. It was already commendable for him to have such foresight when it came to military affairs, but to think that he would be able to do the same when it came to taxation as well, it was truly inconceivable. Ha ha, old Zhao, you don't have to think about this. Duke Zhou has already agreed to have young Master Chong follow by my side. You don't have to think about him. Lord Yi was laughing and scolding him at the side, hurriedly trying to dispel his idea. Duke Zhou had 3 sons and a daughter, 4 grandsons, 2 granddaughters and a nephew. Of all of them, only the youngest young Master Chong was the most eye-catching. Ha ha, you don't have to fight anymore. This child is still young. If he needs your help in the future, none of you are allowed to refuse. In the main hall, the old man was in a good mood. He looked at his old brothers and subordinates and spoke in a half-joking and half-commanding manner. Not at all, not at all. The elders hurriedly replied. They knew that even though Duke Zhou wasn't certain that young Master Chong would be his successor, it was clear that he intended to groom him. Jin-er, did you hear what I said just now? You are an important minister of the imperial court. You must pay attention to this matter. Old Master Wang turned to big uncle Wang Zhen and said, Yes, father. I will definitely handle this matter properly. Wang Zhen replied. Tariff was no small matter. To put it simply, it involved the empire's finances. It was a huge tax. On a grander scale, it was a matter of national and military affairs. It concerned the peace of the empire and the safety of hundreds of thousands of empire soldiers on the battlefield. If it weren't for the old master's birthday, he would have returned to the court and gathered his colleagues for a discussion. This was not just because they had a strong sense of justice, but because Wang Zhen could sense that this was a huge contribution. Whoever signed on it would receive a share of the credit. Given Wang Zhen's experience, he would definitely resolve this matter as quickly as possible. More importantly, Wang Chong was only 15 years old, so it was impossible for him to receive the credit. And as the person in charge of this matter, he would definitely receive the greatest benefits. This would definitely be a great addition to his political career. If he were to be promoted in the future, this would be his seniority. It could be said that Wang Chong was giving him a great credit. Right, young Master Chong, how did you think of tariffs? Duke of Yi suddenly asked curiously. At Wang Chong's age, it could be said that the Wang clan came from a family of generals and ministers. Wang Chong had grown up in such an environment, so it wasn't surprising for him to possess talent in this aspect. However, tariffs were different. This wasn't something that could be explained with just talent. Hearing those words, Wang Chong couldn't help but chuckle. He had said so much precisely for these words. Elders, you are overestimating me. I don't have that kind of ability. Actually, I heard it from my cousin once. What? Everyone was shocked and turned to look at Wang Li. Initially, Wang Qi's head was lowered, and his complexion was awful. But upon hearing those words, he abruptly raised his head and stared at Wang Chong in disbelief. Cousin. It seems like you have forgotten about it. Back then, after you said those words, you immediately said that it was ridiculous. How could that be possible? How could those officials in the royal court listen to you? Back then, you were so engrossed in the military that you probably forgot about this matter. However, I heard it and recorded it down. Cousin, you didn't expect this, right? As Wang Chong spoke, he even winked playfully at cousin Wang Qi. The reason why Wang Chong had said so much wasn't to show off before the elders and gain the limelight. Rather, it was to help his cousin Wang Qi as brothers. Wang Chong had always believed that his cousin wasn't a bad person. In his previous life, he had left home in a fit of anger and his whereabouts were unknown. However, when the Wang clan was in trouble, he still rushed back without hesitation. Even now, Wang Chong could still remember that when the Wang clan fell, he was forced to live on the streets and was bullied like a stray dog. In the end, cousin Wang Qi appeared in time and fought with those bullies. Furthermore, when he was injured, cousin Wang Qi used his back to protect him. Even though he said coldly things like, "I didn't do it for you. I just didn't like those people," and so on, Wang Chong knew that he was here to save him. From then on, Wang Chong knew that his cousin was a person who was cold on the outside but warm on the inside. Regardless of how difficult it was to get along with him or how bad his temper was, it couldn't change the fact that they were both descendants of the Wang clan. From then on, Wang Chong knew that his cousin was a person who was cold on the outside but warm on the inside. The matter of tariffs didn't bring much benefit to him, but Wang Chong knew that it was definitely beneficial to his cousin. "Jina, there's such a matter?" The first to speak was none other than Wang Chong's big uncle, Wang General. In the conference hall, the elders turned to look at Wang Qi. Wang Qi hesitated. Cousin, you've forgotten about it. A few years ago, when I went to look for my cousin, I happened to meet you. Back then, you were sitting alone on a fake mountain muttering to yourself. Later on, you realized that I was eavesdropping and flew into a rage, saying that you would ban me from coming to your house in the future. Have you forgotten about it? Wang Chong's words were so convincing that even Wang Qi was confused. "Young Master Li, is there really such a matter?" the subordinates of the old master asked. It seems like it. Wang Qi hesitated. How could he possibly remember a matter from a few years ago? Furthermore, he had spoken so many words. How could he possibly remember everything? Congratulations, Duke Zhou. It seems like young Master Li is more talented in politics than in military affairs. Elder Zhao suddenly clasped his hands and congratulated the old master. Duke Zhou's eldest son, eldest young master Wang Zhen, was an influential official in the royal court, and he was talented in politics. Young Master Li had grown up in such an environment, and under the influence of eldest young master, it wasn't surprising for him to be talented in this aspect. If the idea of tariffs was thought up by young Master Li, then it would make sense. Li Gongzi is indeed talented in this aspect. If he were to develop himself in the political affairs, he might even catch up to eldest young master in the future. It wouldn't be impossible for the father and son to live under the same roof. The other elders nodded in agreement. In the hall, the old master frowned silently. He seemed to be moved by the idea as well. Actually, when his eldest grandson Wang Li was young, he had displayed talent in this aspect as well. He had an impression of it. However, Wang Zhen insisted on sending him to the military, and the old master rarely interfered in such matters. He was skilled in both civil and military affairs, so it was the same to him. However, if this idea was really thought up by Wang Li, then it might just be possible for Wang Li to follow his father's footsteps and enter the royal court. We'll talk about this matter in the future. Lear, you should thank your cousin Wang Chong. If not for him, no one would have known about this idea of yours. The old master's words brought everyone's attention back to Wang Chong. Indeed. Young Master Chong isn't greedy for merit despite his young age. It's a good thing that fellow clansmen are willing to give in to one another. For young Master Chong to possess such character at such a young age, this is more valuable than anything else. In the conference hall, the elders looked at Wang Chong and complimented him. Their impression of him was even better than before. In the great aristocratic families, kinship was weak, especially in the families of generals and ministers. It was very rare for them to be able to give in to each other. Wang Chong's honesty and modesty didn't lower the others' impression of him. On the contrary, they viewed him even more highly. Young Master Chong, let's get closer in the future. Our Zhao clan has a few residences in the capital, so young Master Chong should feel free to visit us in the future. Elder Zhao and the other elders extended their invitations to Wang Chong. Wang Chong had the chance to be greedy for merit, but if he hadn't said it out loud, no one would have known. Regardless of whether it was in the royal court or the military, it was common for one to be greedy for merit. Even an influential official of the royal court couldn't avoid it. If a person was able to treat his subordinates fairly and not be greedy for merit, he would possess the ability to win the loyalty of his subordinates. Back then, there were so many people who followed Duke Jiu. Even if they had to climb a mountain of daggers or a sea of flames, they wouldn't even bat an eyelid. Wang Chong couldn't have known that this small matter had caused the elders in the conference hall to consider the possibility of him taking over the old master's position in the future. Even though it wasn't guaranteed that it would happen in the end, in everyone's eyes, Duke Zhou's youngest grandson already possessed the potential to unite the hearts of the people and lead all of Duke Zhou's students. In fact, even the most reticent old subordinates were considering this possibility. Wang Chong chuckled. He only felt that the elder's attitude toward him was a little weird, but he didn't think too much into it. Cousin Wang Li's talent in the politics of the royal court was indeed much greater than his talent in the military. This was something that Wang Chong firmly believed in. This kind of talent shouldn't be buried. Otherwise, not only would it be cousin Wang Li's loss, it would also be a loss for the entire Wang clan. Wang Chong believed that those who agreed with him here today would surely thank him in the future, and they would praise him for his foresight. After which, Wang Chong sat quietly by Duke of Ye's side. His performance was already sufficient, and going too far was as bad as falling short. Wang Chong didn't intend to shock the world. In the end, this was an opportunity for grandfather and his old subordinates to reminisce about their brotherhood. The weather has been too hot these few days, so there weren't many replies on the WeChat official account. This made Huangfu feel as though he was playing solo. Thus he sent a WeChat message at 7 p.m., and in the end, wow! Chapter 99. One had to know when to stop. Wang Chong was certain that based on his previous performance, even if he didn't do anything, his grandfather would surely value and groom him, just like his big brother and second brother. However, what happened next exceeded Wang Chong's expectations. Jina, what's the discussion going on in the royal court right now? The old master was chatting with his old subordinates when he suddenly asked about Big Uncle Wang Zhen. Those who reside high in the imperial court worry about the people. Those who reside far away from the pugilistic world worry about the sovereign. Even though his old subordinates had already relinquished their authority, they were still concerned about the affairs of the royal court. Wang Zhen's lips moved slightly, as though he wanted to say something. However, after a moment of hesitation, he changed his mind. There's nothing much going on recently, but the royal court is currently discussing the matter of changing protector generals to regional commanders and establishing 10 great regional commanders. Wang. Hearing the words regional commanders, Wang Chong's body jolted. He abruptly raised his head, and a storm seemed to have swept through his heart. Regional commanders. Wang Chong didn't expect to hear these 3 words here. This was the source of chaos for the empire. Wang Chong had always known of this matter, but he didn't know when it started. Because by the time Wang Chong realized this, it was already too late, the disaster already upon them. Just like everyone else, Wang Chong only knew of the results, but he didn't know the ins and outs of the matter. Yet, Wang Chong didn't expect to hear the words regional commanders in this private room. Furthermore, judging from Big Uncle Wang Zhen's words, this matter had already begun to sprout. Regional commanders, it's actually regional commanders, Wang Chong inwardly muttered. A storm raged in his mind. The matter of Consort Taizhan had attracted the attention of the entire court. Wang Chong was sure that what First Uncle wanted to say just now was definitely the matter of Consort Taizhan. However, the clamor on the surface concealed the real crisis. When everyone's attention was drawn to the matter of Consort Taizhan, no one noticed that the root of the empire's trouble had sprouted. Just like Wang Chong, if not for his eldest uncle mentioning it, he would not have noticed a major event that could destroy the empire in the future. Wang Chong was well aware that the matter of Consort Taizhan was a big deal, but compared to the matter of the regional commanders, it paled in comparison and could not be calculated with logic. The Consort Taizhan incident only affected the fate of King Qi and the Wang clan, but the regional commanders' incident affected the fate of the entire Central Plains. Even so, Wang Chong's gaze swept across the room. Big Uncle, Grandfather, Elder Yi, Duke of Hu, Elder Ma. Clearly, none of them had realized the severity of the matter. Even his big uncle Wang Zhen, as an influential official of the royal court, was the one who had the deepest understanding of this matter. Even so, when he spoke of this matter, he was only slightly moved. He had yet to truly understand the severity and danger of this matter. First, Gongzi, what's the matter with the regional commanders? In the conference hall, Elder Yi asked with a slight frown on his forehead. This is the latest news from the royal court. The Shi, Khitan, and Goguryeo in the northeast, the eastern and western Turkic Khaganates in the north, the Uzun in the west, the Six Zhao in the south, the Abbasid Caliphate and Karaksbazinu in the west have been rising swiftly in the past few years. Every single one of them is growing stronger, more and more restless, and more aggressive. Hearing Elder Ye's words, Wang Zhen revealed the matter regarding the regional commanders without any hesitation. The empire is facing enemies from all sides, and the pressure it is facing is only increasing. Thus, they are considering removing the Protector General and appointing regional commanders. Other than their original responsibilities as Protector Generals, they will also be given the authority to govern 2 additional provinces. This will be done as they see fit, and the priority will be to fend off the enemies. Right now, the Prime Minister is doing his best to push for this matter. On top of that, the Prime Minister is proposing to break away from the usual practice of promoting the who based on talent to fend off the border invaders. Boom! Hearing the last sentence, Wang Chong felt as though a magnitude 12 earthquake had occurred in his heart. The true danger was always hidden beneath a calm facade. His eldest uncle was an extremely sensitive person when it came to politics, but even he probably failed to notice the true motive behind the Prime Minister's proposal. Break away from the usual practice of promoting the who based on talent to fend off the border invaders. There was another saying behind these 19 words, putting an end to border generals becoming ministers. Blessings never come in pairs, and misfortunes never come alone. The regional commander's policy and the who based on talent to fend off the border invaders became the 2 sharp blades that stabbed into the heart of the empire. They also became the two main reasons for the empire's swift collapse. I'm afraid this plan is a little inappropriate. The empire has never placed border generals in such an important position before. Furthermore, there is no precedent in the previous dynasties for a border general to be in charge of administration, Elder Zhao said. He used to be in charge of logistics and military affairs, so he instinctively felt that there was a problem with this matter. However, he only felt that it was inappropriate for the Hu to be in charge of administration, but he didn't think too much about it. This is also the intention of the Holy Emperor, Big Uncle Wang Zhen said helplessly. I heard that the Prime Minister privately suggested to His Majesty that civil officials are too cowardly, lacking the bravery of a general. It would be better to use those poor Hu instead. The Hu are brave by nature and they are used to fighting. As long as His Majesty grants them some grace, they will surely die for the cause. After His Majesty heard of it, he felt that it made sense, so he is seriously considering it. Everyone glanced at one another. If that was the case and His Majesty was implicated, then it would be hard to say. After all, anyone who opposed it was equivalent to opposing the Holy Emperor. Furthermore, this plan wasn't necessarily wrong. Changing Protector General to Regional Commander, using barbarians to control barbarians, isn't impossible. Furthermore, the Hu are brave and warlike. After so many years of the Tang dynasty, these Hu have already assimilated into the Central Plains. In the era of Emperor Taizong, there was Chibi Heli, Ashina and Shi. The current dynasties Zisili and Fomenlinta are all loyal officials of the royal court. If we use them well, just like what the Prime Minister said, those Hu generals will surely die for the cause. Duke of Hu nodded. As an old official, he had to learn not to go against the emperor on unimportant matters. This was the way of an official as well as the way of the bureaucracy. Even though it was a problem to use the Hu, Duke of Hu didn't think that it was a huge problem. As long as this plan is executed well, it's feasible. The 6 great protectorates have been around for nearly 100 years now. It's about time for a reform. Setting up regional commanders will make it easier for us to deal with foreign enemies first. This way we won't have to waste time on documents. It's not entirely without merits. The other elders nodded in agreement. Ever since the establishment of the Tang dynasty, there had been more and more Hu joining them. During Taizong's reign, Chibi Heli had probably killed more Hu than his own tribesmen. Furthermore, under the influence of the Central Plains, many of the Hu had been influenced by the Han. In fact, they had even taken Han names. Take Bai Xiaoda for example. If he didn't say it out loud, no one would know that he was the Crown Prince of Kucha. He was often summoned by the emperor to the royal palace to pay his respects. Compared to their original tribes, these vassals Hu had undergone a great change. In fact, there were even quite a few who had joined the army by the borders. When they fought against the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganate, they didn't hold back at all. Thus, the elders wouldn't be too prejudiced against them on this point. Furthermore, factional strife had always been a great taboo in the previous dynasty. In the previous dynasty, Zhou Chong had even implicated the old King Song in prison for 3 months because he had formed a faction, suffering a great deal of physical pain. All of them knew of this. It wasn't impossible for His Majesty to put an end to factional strife and utilize the Hu. The more Wang Chong heard, the more awful his complexion became. Eventually his face warped. Putting aside the people outside, everyone in the conference hall was an old official of the royal court. They had great foresight when it came to military affairs. They could sense the threat from the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganate in the north, but none of them realized the dangers of the regional commander's policy and the utilizing the Hu policy. Even grandfather's old subordinates couldn't do anything about it. Needless to say, the people in the royal court. Wang Chong finally understood how that policy had been passed in the royal court back then. Impossible. This was absolutely impossible. Wang Chong couldn't hold himself back any longer. If no one in this conference hall could realize the dangers of this matter, then no one in the entire royal court, no one in the world would be able to do so. By the time the deed was done, the outcome would be set. By then it would be too late to say anything. Those who speak too much are bound to slip up. Wang Chong had already made up his mind to not speak anymore. However, if he were to remain silent on such a matter, Wang Chong would never be able to forgive himself. Wang! With Wang Chong's interruption, the entire conference hall fell silent. Everyone turned to look at Wang Chong, who was seated quietly beside Elder Yi. Young Master Chong? The elders in the room were astonished. Wang Chong's sudden outburst left everyone in the room in shock. Even the nearby Elder Yi turned his head to look at Wang Chong in shock. The impression that Wang Chong had given him previously was excellent. He was polite and insightful, and he was extremely respectful to the elders. However, the other party's behavior at this moment was completely out of his expectations. While the elders were chatting, and they had already reached an agreement on the matter regarding the regional commanders, Wang Chong's sudden appearance could be said to be extremely rash and impolite. Wang Chong, what are you doing? Do you have the right to speak before the elders? Hurry up and sit down. Wang Jin's complexion also darkened, and his face darkened. It wasn't easy for him to leave a good impression on the elders. Wasn't Wang Chong ruining his own future? The old master didn't say a word, but his thick white brows couldn't help but frown. This child of his third son, Wang Yan, had left a good impression on him. But no matter how good he was, he had to have a good reason to offend the elders in such an occasion. Ha ha ha. Why are you acting so serious? Young Master Chong, if you have anything to say, just say it. In the end, it was Elder Yi, who had come from the military and exuded a killing aura, who spoke up to ease the atmosphere. He had a good impression of Wang Chong. Even though he was surprised by Wang Chong's abrupt action, Yidong believed that there must be a reason for this child to do so. Chapter 100. The voices of the crowd sounded distant yet close at the same time. Wang Chong's thoughts drifted far into the distance. In order to facilitate the management of the military, the Tang dynasty established 6 protectorates in its initial stages. They were the Anong Anan Shi Bei Chanyu Protectorate Manor and Biting Protectorate Manor. The 6 protectorates were responsible for consoling, subjugating, reporting, and punishing. However, in essence, they were still purely military organizations, and they didn't possess any administrative authority. Through the 6 protectorates, the royal court suppressed the eastern and western Turkic Khaganates, Uzun, the various kingdoms of the western regions, Goguryeo, and the other barbarian powers. However, in the current dynasty, the 6 protectorates were abolished, and the 10 regional commanders were appointed instead. The protectorates were changed to regional commanders, taking over the responsibilities of the protectorates and the 2 surrounding continents. On top of that, the administrative authority of the protectorates was increased, and everything changed. No one knew better than Wang Chong what the future would be like. Of the 10 regional commanders in the Central Plains, the 6 strongest regional commanders in the north would fall into the hands of the Hu. Anxi Regional Commander Gao Xianji, Longyu Regional Commander Gushu Han, Shuafang Regional Commander Anxi, and the 3 regional commanders of Pinglu, Lulong, and Donghe would fall into the hands of the Hu. The positions of these regional commanders might have belonged to the Han initially, but sooner or later, they would all fall into the hands of the Hu. Of the 10 regional commanders, 6 of the most important positions were in the hands of the Hu. Hundreds of thousands of elite soldiers were in the hands of outsiders, causing the defense of the Tang dynasty to be weak on the inside. This was the source of chaos for the royal court, as well as the source of chaos for the Tang dynasty. But at this moment no one had noticed it. Even Elder Yi, Duke of Hu, and Elder Zhao didn't notice the danger, and this made Wang Chong feel a deep pain in his heart. Even though the Tang dynasty had Hu generals in the past, be it Chibi Heli during Emperor Taizong's reign or Zisili during the early stages of the current dynasty, they were just ordinary generals, and the authority they wielded could be retracted at any moment. However, the regional commander strategy and the decision to utilize the Hu would change everything. The Hu people will break free from the category of generals and become a small court at the border. Because they had the right to act at their discretion, the imperial court would no longer be like the previous imperial court, casually transferring them back to the capital and stripping them of their military authority. They were like ferocious beasts, and the imperial court was loosening the shackles on them. Grandfather, old ye, old Zhao, old Ma. And first uncle, no matter what, you must not do this. We must not set the precedent of the regional commanders and use the who. No matter what, we must stop them. Wang Chong said. Everyone in the meeting hall frowned, but no one said anything. They just waited for Wang Chong to continue. Wang Chong's expression was solemn. In front of all the seniors and uncles, he knew that his words carried little weight. All the seniors here were more senior than him. However, the matter of the regional commanders was of great importance. The slightest mistake could lead to the destruction of the common people. Even if no one believed in him, Wang Chong had to give it a try. Grandfather, elders, the imperial court has already done all it could for the Hu in our territory, and we have done our utmost. Chibi Heli was a Hu, but he was able to obtain the trust of Emperor Taizong of the Great Tang, and was given the position of Grand General of the Left. After his death, he was posthumously conferred the title of Grand General who supports the state and governor of Binzhou. He was buried in the Zhao Mausoleum with the title of Lai. Ashina, Shi'er Ahu as well, was conferred the title of Great General of the Left Cavalry. After his death, he was conferred the title of Great General who supports the empire and governor of the Binzhou. He was conferred the title of Yuan. Both of them were Hu, but due to the glory they enjoyed in their lifetime, they were able to achieve higher positions than many Han generals. In fact, they were even conferred the title of Hu to be buried in Emperor Taizong's Zhao Mausoleum. Other than the Tang dynasty, who else could achieve such glory? Also, Zhishir Sili of the current dynasty was conferred a marriage by the previous emperor, marrying a princess. How many Han people can obtain this honor? Right now, to the north of the Tang dynasty, the Anbei Protectorate Manor and Chanyu Protectorate Manor have formed an alliance of Hu and Han. Regardless of whether they are Hu or Han, the imperial court has treated them equally. This is already the limit. But have you all considered what would happen if we were to further utilize the Hu on this basis? Wang Chong faced the gazes of the crowd and said. Even though he was only 15, the imposing aura that Wang Chong exuded far exceeded that of his age. None of the elders on the floor dared to treat Wang Chong as a child. Instead, they subconsciously followed his train of thought along with his tone. The Hu are innately valiant, a result of their harsh living environment. Just like that poem mentioned, while our 10-year-old Han children are still pursuing luxurious pleasures, the 10-year-old Hu children are already riding horses and shooting arrows. With such a mix of Hu and Han soldiers, it's obvious who will stand out. Big Uncle said that Lord Prime Minister mentioned that the Hu are innately valiant and are used to fighting. Due to their poor background, they won't easily form factions. This is true, but I wonder if Lord Prime Minister has considered that while the Hu won't form factions like the Han, the Hu themselves are a huge faction. Regardless of which tribe the Hu are from, when they mix with the Han, they will become a faction. Wang Chong said gravely. Currently, the mixing of Hu and Han was only limited to the Biting Protectorate Manor and Chanyu Protectorate Manor. However, Wang Chong was well aware that once the regional commander system was established, the mixing of Hu and Han would spread from the north to the other regions. Furthermore, with the policies of the Hu and the Han, future Hu generals would appear in the various military regions of the Tang dynasty. Note: Hu refers to Hu. In the conference hall, many people thought that Wang Chong was being too rash, but upon hearing this, their faces immediately warped. There was a subtle change in the atmosphere. Wang Chong's way of thinking was completely different from theirs. Forming factions for personal gain was a huge taboo in the history of the Tang dynasty. As a result, everyone only paid attention to this point, neglecting the fact that the Hu in the inner circle were extremely easy to group together and naturally formed a large faction. On this point, Wang Chong wasn't wrong. We have neglected this matter. This child's words aren't without reason. Elder Ma, Duke of Hu, and the others who didn't pay much attention to the regional commander system and the important Hu strategy, gradually changed their attitude. The Hu and Han are born different, and the difference in their appearance makes it easier for them to form a tighter group. While it's true that they won't form factions for personal gain, this group is likely to be even more dangerous than the factions that the royal court is worried about. With the current policies of the royal court, the Han are still able to suppress the Hu. However, if we were to build on this foundation and utilize the who, everything would be different. Wang Chong paused for a moment. Recalling his previous life's experiences, he couldn't help but feel sorrowful. Given his current strength, there was nothing he could do. At his 15-year-old age, others would only treat him as a child. No one would think much of him. Thus, he could only make use of this occasion and the elders before him to convey the danger and warning in his heart. Elders, we Han have been brought up by etiquette. If a Han were to become a general in order to show impartiality, he would surely reward and punish fairly, and he would generously promote the who. However, I would like to ask, if a who were to become a general, would he generously promote a Han as well? Wang Chong asked. The elders in the conference hall were dumbfounded. Even Wang Chong's big uncle Wang Zhen frowned. Even though he was seated high up in the royal court, the Han generals in the army valued talent and rewards and punishments fairly. As long as the who were capable, they would generously promote them. The reason why there were so many who generals in the army was because of the rewards and punishments given to Han generals. If not for the promotion of Han generals, there wouldn't have been so many who generals in the army. On the other hand, if a who were to become a general, it was hard to say whether a Han would be promoted as well. This was something that not even the elders in the conference hall could guarantee. Wang Chong's gaze swept across the conference hall as he shook his head. No one knew better than him what would happen in the future. The famous general of the Tang dynasty, Wang Zhongxi, promoted Big Dipper General Geshu Han, but who did Geshu Han promote? Huobaguren was his subordinate, and he often brought him with him. Anxi Protector General Fomin Linta was promoted by the current Holy Emperor, but who did Fomin Linta promote? Xinlua's Gao Xianji. Gao Xianji had replaced Fomin Linta, but who else did he promote? Feng Changqing. However, it was a pity that he was only an official in charge of logistics. Of all of them, he could be considered as someone with a conscience. And the future Yuzhou regional commander, the current famous general of the Tang dynasty, the Guazhou provincial governor Zhang Shogawei, was about to do something even more astonishing. The who that he promoted would shake the foundation of the empire, and push this powerful empire into the abyss of internal strife. The people of the divine continent would be plunged into misery and suffering. And all of this happened under the background of putting Hu Jiang in an important position and the regional commander system. Putting Hu generals in an important position caused the who in the army to promote the who, resulting in the emergence of a large number of who generals. The regional commander system pushed them to the peak and gave them the ability to wreak havoc in the Central Plains. Grandfather, elders, and big uncle, the talents of a general shouldn't just include bravery. It should also include commanding troops, formations, logistics, and political affairs. If we only focus on bravery and blindly promote the who, the number of who generals in the army will only increase and the number of Han generals will decrease. As the saying goes, a general's success is built on the bones of 10,000. We Han generals are different from who generals. Only through constant tempering on the battlefield would they continue to grow and gradually show the demeanor of a great general. And this kind of general is far more formidable than the who generals. But if we only focus on bravery and only on talent, we will only put the who in an important position. If the who were to promote the who while the Han are not tempered, the number of Han generals will decrease. On the other hand, the number of who generals in the army will only increase, and the who will form an independent body. If the who were to become the commander-in-chief, I'm afraid that the path of the Han generals will be completely blocked. In fact, there might even be a situation where the leaders of a pure Han army are all who, and the army will only follow the who's lead. Not only so, once the regional commander system is implemented, once the who become the regional commanders, there will be a large number of who generals in the army. All of them will control their troops and listen to orders but not to orders. In the end, they will even threaten the central government and the royal court. By then, the Tang dynasty will be left empty, and I'm afraid that a situation will occur. If the who were to gather together and cause chaos, who will be able to stop them? Who will be able to defeat them? If this goes on, the royal court will lose control, and I'm afraid that there will be a military town separatist regime in the future. Wang Chong lamented. What? Boom! It was as though a bolt of lightning had landed in the hall. Hearing the words military town separatist regime, everyone in the hall was shocked, as though they had just experienced a Category 12 hurricane. Even Wang Chong's cousin Wang Li, who had been pretending to be asleep, trembled violently. He opened his eyes abruptly and looked at his cousin in disbelief. Military town separatist regime. This is not a small matter. If what Wang Chong said is right, this matter will probably shake the entire Tang dynasty. Peng. At the top of the hall, Wang Chong's grandfather was originally seated on the high seat, but at this moment, he suddenly stood up with his hands on the seat. You're tuning into the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.